Everybody needs a break, so we appreciate you being here.
Hey, Chris, I haven't seen you in years.
I know. It feels like, geez, maybe 7.
Yeah, it's been a long time. Welcome.
Good to see you.
Nice
You
to
might
see
need to
you.
give Mala more breaks.
Yeah. Please no.
No. Welcome, Vice Mayor Andori.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. This is Suzanne. I wanted to let you know that this meeting is being recorded and we are streaming live on YouTube. Are we waiting for Councilmember Dawson?
We are not. I was going to announce that she let us know that she will not be here this evening and she has an excused absence, but thank you for asking.
Okay, so before you start the meeting, I'd actually just like to make an announcement that for tonight's meeting, captions are available. So to turn on or off the captions, please click on the CC live transcript button in the toolbar at the bottom of your window. If you don't see that button, you might see a button that says more with 3 dots and then find the closed caption button from there. If you don't see your Zoom toolbar at all, just move your mouse slightly and the bar should reappear at the bottom of your screen. These controls are only available to attendees who joined the Zoom call and not on YouTube. Thank you.
And Mayor, if I might, for the benefit of the public who are used to seeing Mala on the screen, introduce Chris Diaz, who is filling in for Mala while she is on a well-deserved vacation.
Great, thank you. And with that, we will move to call the meeting of the Lafayette City Council on June 27th to order. And by a visual roll call, we will note that all members of the council, except for Councilmember Dawson, are present. And as I noted just a moment ago, she has an excused absence. And then if I might have a motion to approve, adopt the agenda.
I move we adopt the agenda.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilmember Kendall and a second by Councilmember Kwok. I'll conduct the roll call vote. Councilmember Kendall.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Andori.
Aye.
And I'm an aye, so we have unanimously adopted our agenda. And then we will now move on to agenda item number 4, which is an opportunity for members of the public to comment or provide information to the council on items that are not on the agenda. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. There will be a timer. We would love for you to share your name. It's not required, but we would love for you to share your name with us. And because it is not agendized, we cannot engage in discussion on any item that you bring forward to us. We can ask staff to clarify any questions that might come up, but we will not be able to discuss them this evening. So with all of that, sounding very inviting, I want to ask Suzanne to please provide the opportunity for members of the public.
Certainly, Mayor. If any members of the public would like to comment on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now. Mayor, I do not see any hands raised.
And I do not either. So we will now move to agenda item 5, which is the section of our agenda for presentations. And I believe that Suzanne and our city clerk will be working their magic and bringing a number of members of design review and planning and our planning staff over to hear a presentation of the 2022-23 planning department work plan. And our planning director is here, and Chair Radonich, Chair Gray. And are we bringing over members of the planning, Greg? Do we have everyone that's going to be coming over? I
The
see.
full Planning Commission and Design Review the full commissions were invited. It's I'll leave it to your discretion whether we bring them all in at this time and everyone's on screen, which would be great, or we can limit it. I'll be sharing my screen momentarily, so.
Okay, looks like they're coming over.
Nice to
I think
see
it's
you
great
once.
to, I think it's great to bring folks over and they can have their camera on as they wish, maybe in the beginning. And I know that the chair of each body is going to, I believe, introduce their respective commissions. But I'll let you take it from here, Greg.
Great. I'm happy to begin as the remaining commissioners come in. It's my pleasure to report out and present to you our work plan, what we have worked on in the past 12 months and what we propose to work on in the next 12 months. And so with that, it is customary that this, the planning work plan, which is about 12 years old, I think at this point, we've historically had a litany of tasks for sure, but about 12 years ago, we started presenting and getting direction from the commissions and council as to what to prioritize because there were so many things on the list. So tonight, I'll be relatively brief. I'll introduce our staff. I'll present the year in review and the status of last year's tasks, what we propose for this year, and then ask that you approve next year's work plan. So this might be a good time in the presentation to pause, or I'm happy to introduce staff, but then give the opportunity to the chair of the Planning Commission and Design Review Commission. So why don't we go to the commissions at this point?
Okay, thank you.
So I'll invite Chair Radnich if
Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
we
Yes.
can.
Good evening, staff, members of City Council, members of the Lafayette community. I'm Planning Commissioner Chair Radnich, and online tonight, I did also see Commissioner Heising. I apologize if there's any other commissioners on. I'm on my phone. I can't tell. I think it's just the two of us tonight. So I just wanted to provide a quick update of what we've been up to in 2022. It's definitely been a busy year. So a couple themes to highlight are affordable housing, single family development in the hillside overlay, the general plan update, and then the commission itself. So just to kind of quickly touch on each. Obviously, affordable housing is a state focus we're seeing right now through legislation, and that's clearly translating to the projects that we're seeing in the downtown. And it's something that the Planning Commission has seen a lot of. We've seen a couple applications for single family projects in the hillside overlay for phase 1, siding and massing, that have definitely, I'd say, been contentious, that have required multiple hearings. Then many of the different commissions in the city have been working on the housing element update. So GPAC, Planning Commission, City Council, a lot of subcommittees within those. And so the Planning Commission has seen the housing element, the draft, as well as the draft environmental impact report. And then lastly, our commission itself. So we're definitely working hard to maintain consistency among our commission. But unfortunately, there was a recent resignation by Commissioner Maggio. So we do have an opening. So if you yourself are listening and you're interested, the city is taking applications and interested parties are encouraged to apply. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess now, John.
Good evening, council members, staff, everyone. I'm John Gray. I am the chair of the Design Review Commission. I do not see other commissioners joining us this evening. Greg, is that right? So, but I can just give everybody a quick update on how we've been spending the last year. The large majority of the work that's come in front of us has been single family homes. Design review for new homes, for additions, for projects that would have significant exterior change that we would want to review for design. We've had a few smaller number of multifamily projects come before us, but I would say fewer than a couple of years ago. The volume of that has slowed down with us in this last year, and also a few commercial projects. So it's been a busy year, but I would say not as busy as maybe 2 years ago. So we'll see where that's headed. My fellow commissioners are Kristen Seidel, Glenn Cass, and Armin Hadloo, and Eugene Sim.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you both for that. And it's a pleasure to serve both of those commissions and the council. As we tell applicants who are looking to join the city when a vacancy does arise, that we are just amazed by the caliber of the volunteers that serve the community, which is everyone on the council, the planning commission, the design review commission. And I'll ask staff's forgiveness every time I have a zoning administrator hearing. I will take about a minute to do a local government primer to let people know how things operate. And it's amazing to serve all of the volunteers on this call and off the call. I will share my screen. Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Great. So again, this is our annual report and work plan. I covered what we're going to cover. The group are the fine individuals who are doing your planning work for the community. And I tell staff this all the time. One of the highlights of my week is staff meeting, because I get to see all of these people, their smiling faces, and really appreciate all of the work that they're doing. They are the highest caliber and the most dedicated people to work with. So it's my pleasure. We have Nancy Tran, who's a senior planner. Laura Chamberlain has been our planning assistant for the last year, extraordinaire. Renata Robles is also a senior planner. Josh Muller, Samina Nkadawala, and Matt Jones, and most recently, Noah Rumbawa came on board. I think this is his third week and was recently introduced to you, and is training up and doing a great job. So those are our 8 staff. We do have a couple of vacancies currently that we're recruiting for. One of them is for Laura, who took the analyst position in Public Works, and that's a great move. She'll do great. Purpose of the plan is to check in. It's a milestone. We look back and we look forward and do any course correction as needed, trying to align our efforts in the advanced planning or long range planning with state mandates, high priority council policies, and the council's goals for the year. And so there's a little graphical pie chart on the screen. Current planning is still the bulk of what we do. Current being talk with property owners and applicants about what zoning is, what they can do, what they can't do, what the processes and procedures are. And long range planning or advanced planning is has historically been about 20%. That's increased of late, particularly with the housing element update and other housing and zoning laws. So that is filling a bigger, more significant portion of our time of late. So in terms of current planning, 2021, and this is covering the materials that are in your staff report and on the website, we reached near record levels of current planning applications, and they're broken out. The chart shows the last 10 years by application type. And only 1 year in 2016 did we have more applications, and that was only 3. That was 253 applications, and this past year, we had 250 in calendar year 2021. largely kind of consistent or minor upticks, but the three significant changes notably were hillside development permits were up 95%. I'll note that in 2020, the 22 that were received was a downtick. So coming back up to 43 is a kind of normalizing with years prior to 2020. We are seeing upward trends on second units, which are accessory dwelling units rather. Recent legislation has made it easier to apply for and build accessory dwelling units. So we're seeing a noted increase in that, and we continue to expect that moving forward. We've discussed that as part of the housing element. And then tree permits as well, notable increase. And these are protected trees, so they're native to Lafayette, and the community has over time planted more and more trees, and they're getting to an age, and with the warmer climate and extended droughts from over the past decade or so, trees have gone into stress and decline. And so you're seeing a lot of tree permit applications that are trees that are not necessarily outright dead, but certainly in decline and becoming a safety factor on a property. So non-application notes in the last year, and it seems like longer ago, but our RENA appeal was only 9 months ago. And so the Association of Bay Area Governments issued our allocation, our draft allocation in July, I want to say April. And at the council's direction, we appealed that. ABAG noted in their materials that the growth geographies would exclude very high fire hazard severity zones, but nonetheless, they included the Bart station in there, and we noted that as much as in our appeal. And ABAG resolved that through issuing an errata and did not grant our appeal. The council is well aware of all of the efforts that have been ongoing with respect to the housing element updates. It is state mandated, and it is the requirements around that have mushroomed, and all jurisdictions in the state are contending with this, and we're no exception there. So more on the housing element later tonight. The council directed staff to undertake review of the mission statement, and through a core group of volunteers on GPAC, extended community outreach and participation, and the council adopted an updated mission statement in February of this year. We launched an online application portal, which is through a app service called IDT Plans. And so applicants can now apply for their building permits directly online, and throughout the process, know where that stands in terms of plan check, anything that's outstanding. So all of our communications regarding that permit go through there, and it has been terrific for transparency and facilitating our digital plan check and cycle times. And then recently, one of the goals that the council set for us, or the tasks last year, was to implement a call before you dig program, and that has been implemented through Public Works, and they're participating with marking when you see a USA on the ground in the field. And calling before you dig has been longstanding law that applicants are responsible for doing that, but we've now made that a precondition to permit issuance. So if they're going to be excavating and potentially putting underground infrastructure at risk, and then they're required to give us their ticket number before they actually get their permit. So it's executing some leverage to make sure that that is actually complied with. And we continue to maintain our major projects page on our website, lovelafayette.org/major projects. Monthly, we update the status on each of those projects, and I'll just speak to a few of them in the moment. Woodbury Highlands, 99 units on the hill above the Veterans Building in Woodbury housing. That is currently under construction. About a quarter to a third of the units are complete or nearing completion. 15% of those units are below market rate, and Some have already been, the lottery has taken place, and new owners are being chosen through that lottery process, and they continue to be under construction. Lennar, across the street from the city offices in Diamond K, continues to be under construction. They continue to contend with supply chain issues and labor force issues, and some of the windows that were supplied, some of them have defects, and so they're needing to pause so they can replace those. But their intention is to complete the work as soon as possible, and potentially even later this year. 210 Lafayette Circle and the mill at Brown Avenue were both nearing completion of those residential projects in the downtown. Madison Park and Lafayette Lane are both projects that are on our page and have gone through public hearings and are entitled, and we're working with them to satisfy their conditions of approval and get to their construction drawing review and approval so that they can break ground probably after the first of the year. And 950 Huff, similar position as Madison Park and Lafayette Lane. Moving on to the long-range planning tasks from last year. There were 16, and 7 of those have been fully completed. 6 are currently underway or ongoing, and 3 of them are nearing completion. And then 3 had no progress. One of those was the updating the tree ordinance, and the others are noted in there as well. So of those 16, we made tremendous progress with the staffing we had, and the report speaks about the challenges that we face when there is staff turnover. It puts us behind simply the time frame for advertising, interviewing, onboarding, and training someone up. The time is significant and puts us at a disadvantage to complete what we're trying to achieve in any given year. But the staff that is on board is doing a tremendous job and doing an extra heavy lift. So I'm happy to go through any of the 16 in greater detail, but since it's part of the report, I will move on to the proposed task list for 2022 and 2023. So in terms of how to approach the 23 items that are listed in the staff report, we would recommend, as noted, that you endorse staff working on those that are mandated by the state. We don't really have a choice, and so we would encourage the council to prioritize those, along with those which are high priority for the council. And then those that are not mandated and are medium priority tasks, we would still like to take on, but they would be done after those in the first 2 categories. So looking at table 2 of the draft work plan, on the first page of table 2, all of the items 1 through 10 would qualify as either yes, they're mandated by the state, 8 of the 10 are, and then the other 2 are high priority items. And clearly, item 1, recruiting and onboarding new staff, that's critical to be able to do the rest of the items. And then noted previously from the council's priorities, updating the downtown specific plan to prepare to accommodate housing growth after a housing element is approved. Moving on to the second page, those which are state mandated include items 8, 9, and 10 related to Bart, waste management, and SB 35. We are recommending item 12, which is standards for affordable housing eligibility. We've been operating under kind of a template that was developed a decade or 15 years ago, and there are just some best practices that warrant implementation as the time as we're kind of on the cusp of more below market rate units becoming available. Items such as an asset test. So that would be one item that we would bring into the council and recommend adoption of, is being able to have an asset limit so that the household that could be chosen for a below market rate unit wouldn't have an enormous nest egg, but just currently not having income over the income limits. And then adopting the model water efficient landscape ordinance, which is pending. We have been working on that, and then implementing that. Always, once we adopt it and it becomes local law, then we have to implement it throughout all the projects. And then there are 5 items plus WELO that the council recently in April, I believe, approved as part of the environmental task force work plan, and we staff the environmental task force, and so these items are included in our work plan. So the items which would be lower priority, medium priority, and would follow those noted above would be finding a replacement for Community View, which is our online geographic information system where members of the public can type in an address or navigate to and find out local zoning information, click through, understand. So it's a resource for the community and very helpful. We've been notified by the vendor that they're going to support it moving forward. There's no specific end date, but they're not going to continue to make improvements to it. Item 14, inclusionary housing standards. So our inclusionary ordinance does allow the below market rate units to be a little bit smaller and have a lower level of fit and finish, but those are undefined. And so staff would like some policy guidance on or established thresholds regarding those and other aspects, but that's the nature of that. Updating the tree ordinance as mentioned, and evaluating density bonus tiers of review, where that was on last year's work plan. We've begun work on it, so it would be not lost, but it would be in this essentially second tier of efforts. And so that covers the 23 items on the work plan. And so we're seeking your feedback and a prioritized list, and happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. And if I'm sure you're about to click stop sharing so that we can see all of the faces. Thank you. And thank you very much for the very thorough staff report and the condensed presentation of it here in the meeting. And thank you to the staff. And as has been pointed out, the number one priority on that list is to continue to work toward getting us fully staffed in our planning department so that we can better tackle all of these things. But kudos to everyone for the job that's been done over the last year. So are there questions? Before we go to public comment, are there any questions or clarification by council members? And then I saw on the PowerPoint that also commissioners who are here. So I see that Vice Mayor Andrew has his hand raised.
Yeah, first, I join you in thanking the commissions and the staff for all the work in the past year. It's wonderful to see it here. One clarification, Greg, what's the relationship between number 16 on next year's list, that is evaluate density bonus tiers of review, to number 13 on last year's list, review of the density bonus ordinance?
They're one and the same.
Okay, so 13 says that we're going to get the changes in third quarter 2022. So does that mean we're actually going to be carrying out 16? Did I miss something?
No, again, we have begun work on it, but it's not finished, and there's additional work that needs to go into it although it's not a state mandated, and we've assessed it as not a high priority policy item for the council. The council can modify that and say, yes, this is a high priority and since work has already begun on it, we'd be very happy to not table that and finish it out in Q3 of this year. It's just in terms of assessing it, I made the decision that that is a lower priority, but since the work is already there and we're poised, I think it will just, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Kwok.
A great report. I had a question on the staffing. I loved seeing the 8 pictures of y'all there and was curious, how many vacancies are there currently? So how many open positions are you trying to fill at this time?
We have 2 additional positions, or two positions which aren't filled currently. So we're the budget has the department staffed at 10.
At 10 for the full year? Is there any increase across the year, or is it 10 for the whole year?
10 for the year.
Okay. And then a second question related to the tree ordinance. I noticed that like last year, it just barely misses the cut and for getting on the list. But I noticed that the workload is marked as high level of workload. I wonder if can explain what makes it high. Is it like months of work for a person, or what makes it high versus a medium or a low amount of workload?
Well, anytime it is a change to local law, just the requirements around that are significant in terms of public hearings and public notice. Historically, the council has, when undertaking similar ordinance updates, put together an ad hoc committee, which can help inform the policy decisions. In this case, it might be the city's arborist or 1 or 2 local arborists, potentially members of the community who have an interest in that. And so that would be a series of meetings, public meetings, probably via Zoom with potentially subcommittee of the council. So it's a series of months, and for identifying all of the issues in the ordinance that the ad hoc committee wants to tackle, researching, finding out best practices, how what the recommendations are going to be, and then bringing it forward to the planning commission and city council. So it's a little bit involved.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kendall.
Thank you. Wait till I asked the question I was going to ask, was why was it high for the tree ordinance? And thank you for the explanation. This is a really lofty list, and I really applaud you for thinking that you can get through all this. This looks like a lot, and thank you all. If you can deliver on this, wow. But thank you. I did see on one, it was a question I sent to you, Greg, is on figure 1 on page 4 of the document, or page 8 of the PDF. Mm-hmm. About the OTC applications. We didn't get the 2021 bar on that chart. And why I'm interested in that particular one is that's our, ministerial approval. And so I do want to see if that trend is, hugely accelerating, indicating that people are taking advantage of that. So if you could add that and send it out, that would be great.
Thank you for the question. And if I craft a response, I may not have clicked send, but the lack of a bar in figure 1 is not an oversight. It's a function of the online portal that we launched last year. That is not a feature that is part of that portal at the moment, but making it a feature of it is part of our internal processes for the next year, so that we can go back to being able to track those ministerial approvals. So we can give certainly the gross number of ministerial approvals that we've done, essentially building permits and such, but we can't parse it into like hillside development permit and design review for essentially those items which the council has authorized staff to sign off on, essentially de minimis and compliant projects. And so we should be able to report back out on that in our next year on that and see the trending on that. So I neglected to mention earlier, under the types of applications, we'll add another row to reflect SB9 applications, which are new this year. Thus far, we've received 4 applications. I want to say they're all for lot split, and none have been deemed complete and acted on as yet. So we will keep you apprised.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Before I go to the commissioners, I too had the tree ordinance and how to not have that just continue to be on the list and not be able to be moved forward. On the number of vacancies in the staff in our planning department, we're in the process of advertising for most of those, right? And I think you said 2. And then we have 2 contract planners, correct? Who are not currently, I mean, those are not staff positions. We're contracting for those. And that's how we've managed to fill the gap for when we haven't had staff on our payroll, correct?
Correct. And so in talking with admin director today, I think 2 are currently, so we're phasing staffing over the next couple months, bringing advertising and interviewing and bringing people on.
Okay, thank you. And so do any of the commissioners have questions for staff before we open it to public comment? And then we will bring it back for providing input on prioritization and the work plan. So Chair Radonich, Chair Gray, Commissioner Heising. I don't see any hands raised, virtual or otherwise. So Suzanne, we'll now go to public comment. And this is, again, an opportunity for members of the public to provide comment on the planning department work plan. If you have questions, members of staff, and I'm sure my colleagues and I will capture those, and then we would have staff answer them after, so that we're not engaged in a full discourse under this section. So Suzanne, thank you for bringing people in.
Thank you, Mayor. The first person to speak on this item is Cheryl M. If anyone else would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now.
Welcome, Cheryl.
Oh, I made it.
You did, you're here.
Just had a really, yeah, thank you. Really quick question that was just brought up by Greg Wolf, I believe. The Assembly bill, or the Senate Bill 9 bill, he brought up the property that are being lot split. There are 4 of them. Is there a way that the community knows where they are? Are they on the city website that we can find out where they are? Because that's a certain kind of development. I just was curious. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And any other question or comment, Cheryl? Okay, thank you. We will pick that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we will address it just after we hear all the public comment. Thank you.
The next person to speak is Conrad Brees. And if anyone else would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now.
So I see that he's still over.
Yeah. So Conrad, if you can accept the invitation to become a panelist, you can speak to the council. If that doesn't work for you, I can also bring you in audio only.
I appear to be unmuted.
Yes. Good evening,
Welcome.
Conrad.
Welcome, Mr. Brees.
So I apologize. I have something which is, I thought, for regular public comment. It is a noise complaint that arose last night, and I thought I could resolve this with the police department, but that proved to be very unsatisfactory. And I don't want to, headed into summer, have a situation like last night where the band was still playing at 12:45 a.m. this morning in Happy Valley.
Okay, so you were not able to get on during our public comment, not on the agenda. So we'll take that, and staff, I'm looking at staff nodding that they have written that down and they will get back to you. Thank you. And are there any other members of the public who want to comment on the agenda item before us?
If any other members of the public would like to comment, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now. Mayor, I do not see any other hands raised.
And I don't either. Thank you. Thanks, Suzanne. Okay, so we will bring it back, and what the planning department is asking us to do is to weigh in on their 3 ways of prioritizing the state mandate. Hi,
Mayor,
Susan.
You wanted to answer the question from?
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. I said my colleagues and staff will make sure that we answer them. And so Cheryl's question, Greg, was on the SB9 lot splits. Is there a way to find out more about those? Specifically, where are they, and are they on the city website?
I believe they are on the city's website as part of the monthly reporting out that we do for planning applications received. So you can see me looking off screen, trying to confirm that in the moment. But I don't believe that those are excluded from that, and so thus would be included in that.
Okay, thank you. And Cheryl, you know that if that did not answer the question, that you can always, Greg, you want to share the planner at is it planner or planning at lovelafayette.org, or can, of course, call the.
Well, that would be an email address that is monitored daily, and we respond to inquiries. If you want to navigate your browser to our department, so it'd be lovelafayette.org/planning. And then one of the items that you can click on at that department homepage is planning applications received. And it's monthly reports of all the applications received, including the application number, the applicant name, description of the project, and address.
Great, thank you. And also, I think, if I'm not wrong, I think that at the bottom of every one of Suzanne, the publications she puts out on Almost Daily Briefing and the weekly roundup, you can click on that as well to get directly to it. So that was the only question that I wrote down. So I'm seeing general consensus. So we'll move back now to the item, and the staff is asking basically for us to approve or endorse them prioritizing tasks based on mandated tasks, council high priority task, and those tasks needing a modest effort to complete. And so I guess first is just a high level agreement on that. And then I think we can look at if there are some, I don't think we can look at, we can definitely discuss and look at if there are items that we would like to see shifted around. And I saw Council Member Candell have her hand up.
Yeah, I am absolutely happy with this work plan, and I'm in favor of approving it.
Great. Any other comments from other council members? I will say, while others are either raising their hand or not, I am also very happy and very much appreciate the work that has gone into this. I know that for several years, several of us, including our newest colleague, are very interested in looking at the tree ordinance, and particularly as it relates to vegetation management and our wildfire preparedness. At least I won't speak for everyone, but at least from my perspective. But I do appreciate that we'll have to wait until we're fully staffed, or until we believe that it becomes such a dire need that we have to move forward with that, with the potential of actually maybe hiring contract staff. But for tonight, I'm happy to support the work plan as presented. Councilmember Kwok, I was going to say, or Vice Mayor Andrew, but go ahead, Councilmember Kwok.
Yeah, my also appreciation for the huge amount of progress we've made in the last year. It's an excellent report to just quantify the work not only of the staff, but of the Planning Commission, Design Review, and all the GPAC. It's sort of amazing. All the housing element, all the biggies are really plugged in here, and we know it's an absolute mountain of work to move. And so thank you for everybody on the screen right now for being a part of that, and really reflects volunteerism of the city. That also brings me to the next point. Like, this is a mountain, and it's been a mountain every year, and it's going to be a mountain next year. So I just wonder, are we adequately resourced for next year to tackle these? Because these are all super important, either state mandated or high priority items. So I completely agree with going with state mandated and high priority items. And also, we just can't do everything. On the other hand, there are things down lower on the list that are very, very important too. As mentioned, the tree ordinance being one of them. And then secondly, just the number of ETF functions there that are not in the red. And I understand we've had to put a prioritization around this, but if I look at the group in the ETF who are working hard on their priorities, I would feel badly to say, well, you're going to work hard for 12 months, but if there's no time, none of them are going to make any progress this year. I would think that sort of conflicts with like the volunteer spirit of having everybody work hard this year, but then none of their initiatives around EV charging or building electrification or gas blowers. It's when are they going to get that through, next year or the next year? So I sort of see a conflict on that one.
I see the planning director, Greg, has his hand up, and then Vice Mayor Andrew.
Yeah, apologies if there was any confusion about there not being highlights in red on the ETF. It would have been consistent if there were. They're neither, in our assessment, with one or two exceptions, state mandated. However, the council previously approved those tasks as part of the ETF work plan. So they are going to be part of the planning work plan for this year. It's proposed for those items, and only the 4 items which are not previously approved as part of ETF that are not high priority or state mandated. So it's only those 4 items that would be the follow-on items, or the second set of items to be undertaken. So we do plan to work on those ETF tasks this year.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Vice Mayor Andrew.
And I just want to clarify, Councilmember Kwok asked about staffing. The 10 full-time equivalents you're talking about for next year, that's +1 over the past, correct? We added 1 full-time planning department staff person.
Correct. In December, the council added that 1. Yes.
Okay. And then thank you for the clarification on the ETF items, because I see items 17, 18, 19, and 20 as very important to move forward during the next 12 months. And I hope we can accomplish each of those, deal with them one way or the other during the next 12 months. And particularly, I'd like to see us get a jump on number 17 and get that done before any other multifamily applications come in. So thanks for the clarification on that.
Yes. Any other comments? Any commissioners want to weigh in at this point before we ask for a motion to adopt? I'm not seeing anybody jump for their microphone. So Greg, my understanding is that you would, you've gotten your feedback, but that you would really ultimately like a motion to adopt the work plan for 2022, 2023. Is that correct?
Please.
Yes. Okay. So do I have a motion to adopt the Councilmember Kendall?
Yes, I motion to adopt the draft task list for 2022, 2023.
And do I have a second? Councilmember Kwok. So we have a motion by Councilmember Kendall and a second by Councilmember Kwok. I will conduct a roll call vote. Councilmember Kendall. Oh, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, just have to do it. But this is with the priorities we've discussed.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I accept.
Okay. Councilmember Kendall.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Andori.
Aye.
And I am also an aye. And so we have adopted and approved the Planning Department work plan. And with, again, great gratitude and thanks to staff and to the volunteer commissioners who keep this work moving forward. And as Councilmember Kwok pointed out, it's a very large mountain, and you do get through and get over quite a bit of it. So thank you very much. And everyone out there, if you know folks who are looking to be part of a wonderful planning department team and city staff, please send them to the applications that are currently online. And we will move on to the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to, and thank you all as you're all leaving and going off to either the green room or out into your evening. I'll take a breath while they do that. Vice Mayor Andori.
I'd like to pull item 6B from the consent calendar.
Thank you. I thought that somebody might. I have a note to myself to pull it if we didn't. Any other council members want to pull an item from the consent calendar? Okay. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on or pull an item from the consent calendar?
If any members of the public would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now. Mayor, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to adopt the consent calendar with the exception of 6B, which we will hear later in the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Councilmember Kendall and a second by Councilmember Kwok. I'll conduct the roll call vote. Councilmember Kendall.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Andori.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So we have approved the consent calendar. And with my weekly or bi-weekly encouragement for everyone to look at the consent calendar, there are always important items that are on that calendar, and I encourage you to look at them. Okay, so we now move on to going through 7, going through 8, moving now pretty quickly in the evening to our public hearing section and agenda item 9A, which is our continuation of our draft housing element update. And I believe we will be bringing in Renata. I don't see, oh yes, she's already here. You guys are very fast. Thank you to in this case, to the women working the magic behind the scenes, Suzanne Erla and Joanne Robbins. So Renata, I will turn it over to you. Or whichever one of you comes off mic first. Oh,
I see
Naroop. Okay.
I'm going to look to Chris for some direction because the consent calendar was supposed to start at 7 with the public hearings following. Since it's not yet 7 p.m., I'm going to ask Chris whether we can proceed or whether we need to wait until 7.
No,
And
thank you.
Joanne may be able to answer that question as well.
I think you should wait.
Yeah, I would recommend that as well. If that's your past practice as well, and that's an indication to the public as to when you'll start the item, I'd recommend waiting just so that you don't have any suggestion that we move too quickly in advance of the public.
Okay, so shall we take a break? So I take it if we can't go on to our public hearings, we wouldn't be able to go on to hearing the consent calendar item at this time. We would want to go in order. So we will take a break and we will be back at 7 p.m. Thank you. Welcome back, and thank you to City Manager Savatsa for making sure that we didn't move ahead too quickly and are on track with our schedule. And now we will turn it over to the planning department and our consultant, Diana Elrod and Renata and Greg Wolf. Renata Robles and Greg Wolf.
Members of the council, members of the public, we're back for our fourth meeting with the City Council on the housing element and bringing back to you revisions that the council sought and seeking at the end of tonight's public hearing direction for staff to submit our initial draft housing element update to the State Department of Housing and Community Development for review.
And I wanted to, I wanted to just talk about process, just so that we're sort of all on the, and we can modify it, but my thoughts on the process. So first we will, as Greg was beginning, we will receive the staff report. And then as always, council will have the opportunity to ask staff questions, clarifying questions prior to us opening the public hearing and taking public comment. Again, if questions are asked during that time, we will capture them and someone will remind me. No, I will try to remember to ask staff to answer those questions so that we get the most sort of authentic public engagement. And then we will move back to closing the public hearing and and then move to council questions. And after we have our council questions, rather than going through, because this is our third or fourth time of looking at the housing element, rather than going through every section, I will bring up the housing element, I will bring up the appendices, and then we will have council comment and questions on those items. And then hopefully through that process, we're able to give staff direction and are able to move this item. So we'll see where we are at the end of that. But hopefully that process works, and I will now turn it back over to staff to do the staff report part of it.
Thank you. This evening, Diana Elrod will be providing the presentation.
Great, thank you.
Good evening, council members, mayor and vice mayor. So today we're going to have an overview of the timeline and the prior meeting, which was on June 13th. We'll have public comment as noted. We'll discuss some of the policy changes that have been made. We'll go into a little bit more detail about AB 2923 and the housing element and some of the discussions that we've had both internally and with Bart regarding 2923. And overall, the recommendation would be to hold a public hearing, provide feedback on the updated draft housing element, and to direct staff to submit its first draft to HCD with the recommended revisions. So I wanted to share a little bit about the anticipated review timeline. June 28th, the plan is to submit our initial draft to HCD, that's tomorrow. HCD has its first 90-day review. There is only one statutorily required review of 90 days. However, HCD has been warning jurisdictions in the Bay Area, consistent with what happened in Southern California, to expect a second 90-day review period at some point. In October, we expect to receive the comment letter from HCD. We will revise the housing element to address those comments. If we have to have another 90-day review, we would resubmit in November. The goal is, however, to meet the deadline of January 31st, 2023 with a final adopted housing element for certification. That is somewhat up in the air in terms of depending upon how long it takes HCD to conduct its reviews. Next slide, please. So I wanted to remind folks of the consequences for not having a certified housing element. There are a number of consequences, some financial, some of the loss of control. Primarily, the first bullet says lose local control over how and where housing projects are built. This is a builder's remedy, which would basically a builder could go to a court and the court can impel the city to accept development irrespective of what the local zoning requirements are. The city would be likely and would in all probability lose funding, including certain transportation funds. Any affordable housing projects that could come online in Lafayette would not be able to qualify for state funding because an underlying requirement is that the locality have a certified housing element. HCD can refer action to the state attorney general for enforcement. And as we've seen in many Southern California jurisdictions, this has become an increasingly common occurrence. The courts can also levy up to $10,000 per unit $10,000 per day per unit in fines, up to about I believe $600,000 a month. Next slide, please. At the previous meeting, we reviewed the third revised draft housing element. We had a discussion about the El Charro parking lots and discussion regarding whether to include them in an upzoning, which was decided against. Questions were raised and requested of staff to provide information on policy changes, as well as the city's obligations for Bart under AB 2923.
And before we leave this slide, just want to address a comment or a question that we received regarding the El Charro parking lots. So because those are adjacent to existing commercial zoning, upzoning those would not be considered spot zoning because it's consistent with those adjoining uses. So I just want to clarify that for everybody's edification.
Thank you. The public review of the draft housing element is now in statute. The comment period was open on May 6th and closed on June 6th. That said, we have accepted all comments. Any comments we've received, we've reviewed and shared both before the official public comment period, and we will continue to do so after the public comment period. This is a new statutory requirement that jurisdictions have a formal public review process prior to submitting the housing element draft to the state. 48 comments were received during the public review period. These were previously provided to the City Council as public comment. They are also included in the packet today. We made revisions incorporated in response to many of those comments, and we can talk about what those revisions were. Next slide, please. I'm just going to give you a high-level summary of the public comments, and we'll talk a little bit about which ones were actually incorporated in the housing element. We provided this information at the last meeting, so this isn't really any new information, but just as a reminder, primarily retain the semi-rural quality of Lafayette was very much front and center of the discussions. Most people did not want to, who commented, didn't want to upzone the downtown, but there were other folks that do want to upzone the downtown. Similarly, many people spoke about not upzoning De Silva, and a handful of people said do upzone De Silva, including the De Silva property group. There was wide consensus not to increase density along Deer Hill and Happy Valley and the Glen. There was just a lot of input on upzoning the Bart just to the required 75 dwelling units per acre and not any higher. Concerns about climate change, fire hazards, and sustainability were all comments that were kind of consistently throughout the comments, even before and after the comment period. There were suggestions to make ADUs easier to develop or to create affordable housing with them. And there were suggestions to make the goals, policies, and programs more actionable. Next slide, please. So the revisions to the draft housing element that's before you, we included an updated sites inventory summary table to correct around the rounding issue, which we talked about the last time. One policy change, H47, on page H47 was changed to upzoning timeline and the addition of a sentence regarding Bart. This is talking about specifically talking about the steps the city will take in order to make Bart a hopefully an approved site for opportunity site for the housing element. We changed and made enough change to update the goal number 8, facilitate a mix of housing types with development standards, rather than just highlighting density and height limitations, but talk about development standards broadly spoken that are appropriate for the subject neighborhood. Next slide, please. There are additional suggestion revisions which are relatively minor, but they're called out here. These were provided by Vice Mayor Anduri primarily, and changing some of the language, especially in the discussion about seniors and the concern about losing their primary asset, which is their home. So these changes will be made. Next slide, please. In terms of the goals, policies, and programs, basically these are the implementation measures that make the housing element actually work. These must be actionable. The state has changed how it looks at housing elements, specifically in their programs. They must include timelines for completion, and having them just say this is an ongoing thing and we'll look at it is not significant or not sufficient to address the concerns. There are a multiplicity of kinds of programs. This sort of sharing with you what they are. There are required programs, i.e. things like farm worker housing. We are now required to call it out as an actual thing, like define what farm worker housing is and make sure that there are some areas where farm worker housing, both permanent and seasonal, could be located and permitted within the community. There are procedural administrative changes, including the housing impact statement. And I will defer to Renata about that one because I don't really know what that means. Can you share?
Sure. So it's effectively when new multifamily housing is proposed in our staff reports, we are referring back to how the project will or will not advance our progress towards meeting our RHNA allocation and doing kind of an update of where we stand.
Thank you. In terms of the provision of information, we provide detailed information on resources for housing for special populations, looking for seeking opportunities to support special populations. There are analysis type programs that include like looking at funding sources for affordable housing development, doing an analysis, feasibility analysis on different kinds of funding opportunities and how well they would work in the community. And then lastly, incentives, for example, looking at things like reduction in fees for accessory dwelling units in order to encourage their development. Next slide, please. Some of the required programs I should mention include nexus studies. There's a new law in the books that requires jurisdictions to update their nexus studies on a regular basis. Updating CEQA processes to make sure that we're in conformance with that. Data collection and compliance with SB 330, which is primarily about housing replacement requirements, that when a house or a multifamily development is demolished, that before that the units that were lost to lower income households have to be replaced in kind. We have a requirement for RHNA monitoring program to make sure that we have an ongoing no net loss accommodation, the zoning to accommodate RHNA, whatever is required to make the RHNA numbers work. In this instance, the proposal is to upzone the Bart site to 75 dwelling units to the acre in order to make that work. Again, farm worker housing, low barrier navigation centers, these are all new requirements in statute and information required as part of the annual report to HCD every year. Some of the financial incentive programs that we are intending to look at, nothing obviously is committed to, but this is something that we have recommended or the City Council has recommended in terms of the ADU development fee reductions. This was a council recommended program And development impact fees are not collected for most recent ADUs, but there are instances where there might be opportunities to further reduce costs associated with ADUs to make them more incentivized. The other lot line revision application fee waiver, this was something that staff had recommended looking into, and it's an incentive to combine small lots for multifamily projects in which the application fee would be waived based on analysis that staff conducted. Assuming 5 large projects every year, the fiscal impact is less than $10,000. But in terms of, it's yet another way that we can incentivize lot consolidation. Next slide, please. And at the last meeting, concerns were raised regarding whether or not what are the advantages or disadvantages of upzoning the Bart site rather than, or in fact, waiting until some other point in the future. We, at staff level, met with Bart, and I know that a member of the Bart TOD staff is here in the audience to answer questions. I'm sure, not to put you on the spot, if they arise. But we met with staff at Bart, and then we had, based on the information provided by Mr. Colin Elliott and Councilmember Candell, we met with them and Bart staff and discussed some of the concerns that had been raised in the communication that is part of the packet, the communication between Councilmember Candell and Mr. Elliott. Those emails and the attachments are included in the packet, and we discussed some of those concerns with Bart and clarified a number of points. If you've had an opportunity to look at some of that material, these are sort of a high-level summary of the outcome of those discussions. Hello. Yes, thank you. So sort of the focus or the goal is to remove barriers for residential development near transit. There are minimum zoning standards for parking lots. Some of this is included in the actual legislation. It does take effect July 1st without council action. And it should be noted that the 2020 Bart Transit-Oriented Development Work Plan guides the implementation for all these sites that are included. Additional local zoning can be included on top of minimum standards. There will be a very public process with a lot of community engagement, which will guide development proposals to meet the community's priorities. We've included in the packet also information, for example, from sort of an FAQ, frequently asked questions, from the recently provided Bart TOD, sort of a tear sheet for the Ashby North Berkeley Bart station process. And you can see the level of community participation in that tear sheet. Next slide, please. So TOD at the Lafayette BART station. Lafayette is not currently in the 10-year work plan based on the previous assessment by BART of local support, market readiness, and infrastructure needs. Each one of these categories has a series of criteria that are scored by BART and determine where in the work plan, based on those scoring, where a particular BART station would fall in their work plan. Lafayette's fell outside of the work plan, the 10-year work plan, and would not be currently included anytime within the next housing element cycle. Next slide, please. So some of the questions that we felt were discussed in the meetings that we thought were really important to share. BART must engage with the community. It is a requirement of their work plan. They cannot do any work that doesn't include the community. This is a collaborative process. It should be noted that there's no difference in the financial obligations between the AB 2923 standards and local zoning changes beyond staff time. That is, there's no financial difference in obligation whether the city upzones the site or does not upzone the site and lets the provisions take effect without city action. To clarify, BART does not sell its land. It will retain a ground lease on all of its property, generally speaking. It does not require development agreements between the BART, the city, and the developer. There are other kinds of agreements that are made, but there are not specifically this thing called development agreements. BART does not master plan the site. It defers to local rules. Again, this is a collaborative process. The state density bonus could potentially apply regardless of whether the city upzones the site or it lets the provisions take effect with no action. So whether that actually comes into play is way down the pike in terms of an actual development project. Either the city or a developer conducts the environmental review later in a pre-development process, and included in the packet is a large graphic that explains in detail the process by which development takes place on BART sites. And what one can definitely gather from that, it's a long and complicated development process with very many moving parts that will take, if we start today, for example, it will take several years for anything to even get close to the beginning of an actual project. Next slide, please. Just to summarize the consequences of not taking a local action. If the city does not upzone the BART site, Lafayette will not be moved up in the BART work plan. That's because no local action demonstrates a lack of interest in development. BART will evaluate its work plan in the next year. There's a lot of work that would need to be done for us to move further up on the and score better in the criteria. And it was noted that other cities who have been further out in the BART TOD process, i.e., like Lafayette, were not really in this 10-year work plan. Many of them are now also going to be considering using their sites to meet housing element requirements. Therefore, there will be several jurisdictions who are working to score better and potentially make a pitch to move up further on the BART TOD work plan. And the city must take meaningful action to demonstrate its interest and to be considered as a midterm project, i.e. during the life of the housing element. And that said, if we can't upzone the site and we can't move up in the BART timeline, we will not be able to use the BART sites to meet any of the RENA allocation and of what we have currently ascribed to that site or those sites, which is about 820 units. They would need to be allocated elsewhere in the city and it would require upzoning in other parts of the city. Next slide, please. So the options for the city's action in regards to BART to lay the groundwork for a TOD project to align with community goals, engaging the community and creating a vision for the site, working with BART to do that, adopt local regulations that build upon AB 2923 minimum standards. The council would adopt a resolution supporting TOD on the BART parking lots. They could do that to demonstrate support for it and commitment, and to seek out funding and conduct analyses to assist with infrastructure needs like replacement parking, which is extremely expensive and something that BART is struggling with on every site, as well as buying out the current lease on the existing solar panels. So there are a number of things the city can do to demonstrate its commitment to moving forward. But in terms of the housing element, why we're here today, the number one thing that the staff is advocating for is to move forward with the zoning of the BART site. And we can talk a little bit more about what that actually involves. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder of the local development standards for BARTs and the discussions that's taken place on January 18th, the Planning Commission unanimously recommended to create local standards and upzone the site. February 28th, the City Council directed staff to prepare the draft zoning and objective design standards. Summer 2022, which we're currently in, the Planning Commission is going to have the anticipated review of the draft development standards, which would be primarily an overlay rather than an actual outright rezoning of the existing site. It would be an overlay that maintains the underlying zoning, but the overlay would accommodate all of the requirements of AB 2923. Community input has been and will continue to be sought throughout the drafting process, and as part of this process going forward. Next slide, please. So our recommendation is to direct staff to submit our first draft of the housing element update with whatever recommended revisions you deem appropriate to HCD. And our goal would be to get it to HCD tomorrow or the next day. The faster we can get it, the faster the first 90-day review is concluded. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Diana and Renata and Greg and the GPAC and the Planning Commission and all the people who have gotten it to this point. And so we will now open for clarifying questions of council and Vice Mayor Anduri.
Elrod, would you mind sharing the screen again and going back? I have questions on each of the slides, starting with about the fourth slide.
Oh boy. Okay.
Well,
yes.
Maybe not that many.
Renata, I defer. She is the keeper of the PowerPoint.
Was there a specific slide you wanted to start on?
Keep going. Keep going. Okay, keep going. Keep going. Okay, there. Let's see. Okay, next one. I think my questions start on the next one. Okay, I think it was here, or maybe it was on a later slide. You said that, well, actually, it's clearly on a later slide. So if you could move one more forward. Okay, and that's all clear. So one more. Maybe I don't have that many questions. Okay, so on this slide, when we discussed the HCD, Bart will not be accepted opportunity HCD. I think you said that if Bart does not move us up, despite our any good faith efforts, and I understand there's a Bart TOD official with us, and just saying we're looking to do this, if despite good faith efforts on the part of the city, are you saying that if Bart says they're not going to move us up, then that's a done for HCD? It's just not going to happen?
Well, that is the thinking. Yes, at this time we don't actually know because there are no BART stations that have actually gone, as far as I know, to HCD yet, as in the Bay Area, for as part of its review and including it for the housing element. However, in the discussions that I have had sort of in an informal way with HCD staff, especially the head of the unit that reviews, and bringing up that issue, that they would want to see a firm commitment and that it would have to be developable within the 8-year period. It will not be developable within the 8-year period if Bart does not move us up on the timeline.
Okay, I'll have further comment on that, but could you go to the next slide? Okay, now you've got all these, but this is all, as I just make sure it's clear, this assumes that the city proactively upzones or creates a TOD overlay zone, overlay district.
Yes.
Okay, that's behind all of this.
Yes.
Okay, can I see the next one? Okay. And maybe that, and the next one, I think maybe I've. Okay, so just to make sure absolutely clear, what we're talking about now is not a straight up upzoning, but we're talking about developing a TOD overlay district similar to our senior housing overlay.
Correct.
Which I think makes a lot of sense because, well, I won't comment now. I'll come back to that. Okay, those are my questions for now.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? Councilmember Campbell and then Councilmember Quad.
Sorry, this is regarding the questions we got about the mission statement. Is it, can we and should we include our mission statement in this part of our general plan, the housing element update? If so, why or why not?
I don't necessarily think for the housing element, it's off topic in terms of what we're trying to statutorily comply with something. And I would defer to Greg about the general plan.
Yeah.
I don't want to, general plan, I know it'll be in, but in this housing element specifically was where I was asking.
Yeah, customarily it's part of the introduction to the general plan, which is encompassing all of the elements that are required under state law, and those which are optional as well. So it wouldn't be in any given one of the elements proper.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Okay, Councilmember Kwok.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question to Vice Mayor Nduri's question about upzoning. That was the second to the last slide because I wanted to clarify whether on the one hand, are we doing the upzoning of the Bart, but then there was also the overlay district, which said it maintains the existing zoning, which I didn't know what that meant. So I wonder if are we doing both upzoning and the overlay district, or
no,
just one or the other?
We're advocating for an overlay, and I can let Greg speak to that.
The overlay would be the mechanism for the upzoning to Bart's TOD standards and with local objective standards as well. So it would accomplish the goal of the upzoning and the additional parameters around that the community would want to see.
Okay, so in the eyes of HCD and of Bart, the overlay district is essentially, in their view, proactively upzoning, would be considered proactively upzoning?
In terms of Bart, yes. In terms of HCD doesn't consider issues pertaining to the kind of zoning action taken as long as the underlying, as long as it's in compliance with that site's going to be in compliance with AB 2923, and therefore it's 75 dwelling units to the acre.
Okay, I got it. Thank you for explaining. The second question I had related to sort of the closing sentence in the staff report and what you mentioned in terms of TOD. In the next year, Bart will be reevaluating the TOD work plan, which will include reassessing the development timeline for Bart lots subject to AB 2923.
Correct.
And based on the meeting you had with Bart and this sentence, is this an indication that we could expect within the next year, within the 12 months, hence that Lafayette would be reconsidered and would have a chance to be included in the TOD?
Depending upon quite a number of actions, it's not just the upzoning of the site. If you read the Bart TOD guidelines, it's not just the rezoning of the site, or however you want to put it. It's what other actions has the jurisdiction taken to facilitate infrastructure improvements? That's one of the criteria. There's local support is number one, or the first category. The second one is market readiness. Market readiness is basically not an issue because there's a lot of development happening. And the third one is basically how are infrastructure constraints going to be handled? And that is where, and that was that additional slide I shared where I said, although this doesn't particularly pertain to the housing element itself, these are things that will need to be looked at pretty quickly in order to get ourselves rescored at a higher score.
Okay,
And
this is all the second to last slide or third to last slide. You had put those 3 areas of action that we could do.
I'd
Go
like
ahead,
to also
Renata.
add that BART staff specifically also called out that one action that they would look to for jurisdictions is advocacy for additional resources and being put towards BART. So working with MTC and CCTA to help BART have the capacity to help manage all these requests and work through these timelines in a reasonable manner. So that's another thing that the city can also undertake in the next year to show our commitment.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Anduri.
One of the last slides said that you are ambitiously planning to submit tomorrow. And as you know, one of the biggest dilemmas we have is that we've been given 2114 as our RENA number based on having a BART station. And if for some reason we can't count the units at the BART station, we're gonna have to find them somewhere, so they're gonna be in effect double counted. How, and I agree, well, okay, I'm gonna ask a question. How do you intend to convey our situation and concern to HCD? Do you plan to meet with them soon after submission? What is the plan?
2 ways. Number one, we're going to have a cover letter, and I think that we will be able to bring this up and really give them focus on that. And we will definitely reach out soon after it's submitted. We don't really know who the reviewer is, and the head person who's the head of reviewer will reach out to him specifically because he understands. He was very involved in the city's last housing element so he understands the issues facing Lafayette in general, and understands, because of prior communication I've had with him about the BART site and discussions with him informally. I think that that's our next step, is really to give them a couple of weeks or so and to assign it to a reviewer and then reach out and have a discussion. I think that it makes sense for us to kind of guide them through the housing element instead of them making assumptions. And that's basically, I think, what we're going to do, is request that kind of dialogue with them.
Vice Mayor Anduri.
And my last question, we received a public comment with respect to Appendix G, and it's the AFFH action area 2, and the item is 2.2. Let's see. No, sorry, 2.1. Pilot of by right approval for low density attached housing that exceeds the BMR affordability requirements. And over under responsible party, it says TBD, I assume means to be determined.
Correct.
And in the next, under objectives, it says increased development of accessible units. Does that mean BMR units, or does accessible have a different meaning than under the ADA?
Because it would be under the ADA, because these are issues under AFFH. And so people with disabilities are disproportionately impacted. And so it is to look at ways to incentivize, work with, however, provide opportunities for people with disabilities in those units.
Okay, and then the final, not the final box, but the box under quantified objectives, develop pilot program with other jurisdictions. So you anticipate this is something that we would do as a region? And that's why perhaps it's TBD as to who's going to take responsibility?
That's exactly correct. We, there is this collection of all of the jurisdictions in Contra Costa County are working with an umbrella group called the Collaborative, also known as C4, and they are talking about the possibility of being that whatever that facilitator for those discussions. But it'd be really, we haven't had a firm commitment from them on those discussions, and so that hence it's TBD, but it's on our list to discuss with them as part of their work program. They have a huge chunk of change from ABAG, MTC to help Contra Costa County jurisdictions with precisely this kind of work.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions, clarifying before we go to public comment? Okay, so we will open the public hearing, and Suzanne, will you please provide instructions on how the public can address us?
Certainly, Mayor. If any members of the public would like to comment on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. The first speaker is Elliot Hudson. If anyone else would like to speak, as I mentioned, using the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, use the raise hand feature so that we know that you are interested in talking on this item. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Geringer and members of the City Council. The most important thing you just heard, I'm going to speak tonight really on the Bart lot. The most important thing you just heard is that just like many of the scare tactics that the consultant has used in the past, she finally admitted that we do not know what HCD will do about the Bart site if it's not in the Bart work plan. That is incredibly important because it is, as we've discussed many times, what is essential for Lafayette to do is use the comment periods with Bart and the negotiation opportunities to determine what what HCD will actually require that best protects Lafayette. First thing is with respect to the Bart lot, I'd like to repeat that it is essential that Lafayette not deprive itself of the ability to rely on any changes in the law that might result from the challenge to the RENA numbers, that might result from changes in the law under legislation or initiatives. Any zoning of that lot should be provisional in the sense that it applies only if so long and to the extent required by law. I'll leave it to the experts as to whether that's an overlay or a conditional wording of the language, but the consultant also told you HCD does not concern itself with the type of zoning, so provisional zoning can occur, and Mr. Wolf told you in a previous meeting that provisional zoning is possible. Secondly, it is absolutely outrageous for HCD to deny Bart as an opportunity site based on the, for HCD to deny Bart as an opportunity site based on the Bart work plan. The only reason Lafayette has been given 2,114 units instead of 160 units is because of the Bart lots. That assignment was based on the mere existence of the Bart lots without consideration of whether Bart had any actual plans for development. If Bart chooses not to prioritize development of the Bart lots, then the entire justification for that increase drops away. If we're not in the Bart plan, we should have 1,660 sites, not over 2,000. If Bart chooses not to develop, Lafayette should not be penalized. Therefore, in the present circumstances where Lafayette's Bart number is the Bart-based 2,114, HCD can and should include Bart on exactly the same basis because of the existence of those lots. Nothing else is fair and reasonable. And if Bart were to change its plans and require development of those lots in the 8-year period after Lafayette had been required zone elsewhere, we'd be penalized for that. HCD should not be that unreasonable. Lafayette should go to HCD and demand that that the Bart lot be counted as opportunity sites, regardless of any other planning status for those lots. If HCD refuses, we've got comment periods and we can rework it.
Thank you for wrapping up. Thank you. Are there any questions from council members for the speaker? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you, Mr. Hudson.
If any members of the public would like to comment on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now. Currently, the next speaker is Colin Elliott, followed by Cheryl.
Welcome, Mr. Elliott. Welcome. I don't know if you are muted or having a similar problem to what we had last week during our meeting. Yeah, we can't hear you, Colin. Still, and try now. Nope, we still can't hear you. I don't know, yeah, how we resolved it last week. No, we still can't hear you. Do you want to go back out, come back in?
He called in last time.
Yeah, that's right. Go back to your phone. And what I'm talking about is the subcommittee or the meeting that was included in all of the public materials where Councilmember Kendall and I met with Colin Elliott and Bart and staff. So Colin, if you want to go back out, come back in on your phone, we'll try from there and we'll go to the next speaker. Okay, Suzanne?
The next speaker is Cheryl. And if anyone else would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now. In addition to Mr. Elliott, beyond Cheryl, there are currently no other hands raised.
Okay.
Am I here?
Yes, you are. Welcome.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, phew. So Councilmember Kwok asked a really good question, and I think Diana answered it, and I wondered if she could do it again, talking about the overlay district and explain it to the layman out here one more time. I'm getting it, but I just wanted to explain it one more time in the way you did it to Councilmember Kwok. And then I wondered for infrastructure if Route 25 was taken away because of inactivity. Working with the county, you talked about working with the county. If we were to bring bus 25 back, would that be infrastructure improvement? Along with the recommendation of the pilot program we have with the Spirit Band, which I don't think has started yet, but at least it's we approved the funding for that. Would that be an infrastructure improvement as well? And then would one more infrastructure be that we're Chief McAllister came last September and talked to the council about the new fire district and the fact that we're already engaged with that. Would that be an infrastructure improvement? And could that be used either with BART or HCD? So those are my things. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So Diana, what we'll do is let's wait until we finish public comment and then we'll answer all of those. So hopefully we all captured those. And thank you, Cheryl, very much for all of your public engagement.
The next speaker is Libby Henry, followed by Sharon Farley.
Welcome, Ms. Henry.
I'm retired. Don't call me Miss Henry anymore.
It's my attempt to be somewhat formal, but welcome, Libby.
Hi. And good evening, everybody. I would first of all like to thank everybody that's on the screen that I'm looking at right now, and all of the planning department commissioners, the GPAC. You know, it's been a long haul, and also members of the community, of course, including myself. But I really feel like, and I'm hoping that the council and, you know, however you make your final decision, it feels like that you are going in the right direction. And I hope you receive my letter. I sent it right at noon. Just keep in mind about the mission statement and how it relates to the feelings of how people, the housing element. Yes, we have to, comply with HCD, but we don't have to turn Lafayette into a urban sprawl. I also noted Elliot's, his letter was so eloquent and so specific and so right on target as far as any little I'm not sure what to say, ways that the HCD can look at our final thing and say and try to reject it. So thanks for your time. And I know that you're going to, use your hearts as well as your minds and make the right decision as far as what we do with the housing element and sending it to HCD. And I hope that Colin comes back.
I see him in the waiting room. So are there any, thank you, first of all, are there any questions for the speaker? And then I apologize, I forgot to ask that for Cheryl. If there were questions from any of my colleagues, we can bring her back in, but I'm seeing shaking of the head. So Cheryl, I apologize for not asking at that time, but okay, so we will now move on to the next speaker. Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you, Libby.
The next speaker is Sharon Farley, followed by Colin Elliott. And if anyone else would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now. Thank you.
Welcome, Ms. Farley. I think you're on mute.
There we go.
Welcome.
Thank you for the reminder.
That's okay. We all hear it regularly.
I'm hoping that this is an okay place to do this. And I was wondering if Renata could elaborate on the explanation as to why rezoning of the El Charro parking lots is not considered spot zoning. I have, it's hard for me to understand that. And I was just wishing or just hoping that she could clarify that for me.
Thank you. And we will ask her to do that when we address questions after we close public comment. So do you have other comments or questions?
I do.
Okay.
What is a low barrier navigation center? And then if the HCD doesn't approve the Bart, what will be the procedure going forward? How will the public be informed and engaged and have a voice? And that's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will answer those questions. And do any members of the council have questions for the speaker? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Farley, for your questions and for your ongoing engagement as well.
The next speaker is Colin Elliott, followed by Patty Battersby.
Welcome, Mr. Elliott.
Hopefully you can hear me this time.
We can hear you and we can see you. So thank you. And thank you to Councilmember Candell for reminding us how that magic works. So
yeah,
welcome.
Thank you. I have a Zoom problem. Apparently Teams is fine, but not Zoom anymore. So
Here-
I didn't want to say a lot, but I just wanted to confirm what Diana had said. You know, the call we had with Bart representatives was very helpful. And I think we all agreed, and I did send a note to council members before this meeting, laying some of this out, but it's going to be a long and complicated process. And it was very good to hear that they absolutely want the community engagement as part of this. So that's good. For reasons already stated by others, you know, I support the way that you're planning to do this by way of an overlay district. I think that's the right way to go at this time. And I did want to add maybe a couple of things you could say in the steps that you're planning to take. You actually mentioned, staff mentioned, Bart was asking for assistance and advocacy and getting funding. I see no reason why we couldn't actually mention that as a step, that we would help assist them to the extent we can. In that, I think you already have in there that we'll look at other sources of potential financing. And I'd mentioned in my email community facility districts, so there's things we can look at, which could incidentally also fund parking if it's for the public. And then the other thing that didn't come up was, and I know it's been called premature, but would we want to enter into a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with Bart at some point as to who does what? I think we probably would. And that may be something else that we can mention. The other thing was, you probably, some of you probably heard that the developer Bart selected for their North Concord station backed out. I think that news came out last week, but it apparently it went back to April. But and if somebody's on from Bart, it would be interesting, because I think that certainly the news reported that Bart said they weren't planning to actually do much more, even though they have developer interest. They're planning to kind of put that one on the back burner, largely, I think, because the naval station is not advanced enough, and it makes sense to get that advanced. But hopefully that might mean there's some flexible system to potentially move other cities up, like Lafayette, if North Concord's not going ahead. And we certainly have a stronger, I would say we have a much stronger market than North Concord in the first place. So that should be encouragement. But otherwise, I'd echo what other people say, that it would be, you know, egregious of HCD to just say, no, you can't use Bart, when clearly that's a major. That's it. That's all I wanted to say. And thank all of you.
Thank you. And thank you for the input and for taking the time with the meeting. Are there any questions for the speaker from my colleagues? And I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Elliott, and thank you for working through the technical difficulties.
The next speaker is Patty Battersby. And there are currently no other hands raised after Patty. So if you'd like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now.
Welcome, Ms. Battersby.
Good evening. Thank you again for all of your participation in this. I just again want to support the comments of Elliot Hudson and Colin Elliott. I think that the BART is probably the elephant in the room in terms of being challenging. I'm not experienced enough to know whether it's a provisional, whether it's an overlay district, but I will say, as a Glen neighborhood member and representing the Glen is very, very concerned about BART. And again, I've said it over and over, but it's just such a real threat in terms of our safety and evacuation, being in a very high fire zone. So again, I think we have to be very, very careful about what we do for BART. The other thing that I want to say is I appreciate the fact that you're increasing the ADUs. I appreciate the fact that you're excluding the deer hill. I think that it's really important, and I've said it bunch of times, but I also know that there's 3% of the population, or not population, but comments that disagree. But I urge you to listen to the 97% of the residents who are saying, please, please, we do not want urbanization. We want to maintain the semi-rural character of Lafayette. And I think, I'm not certain when the EIR is going to be coming up before the council. I keep bringing it up, but the Glen and part of Happy Valley is listed as an alternative site, and that needs to be removed. We're in a very high fire zone again. The other thing that just came to my attention was this draft of the Fair Housing Assessment Appendix, and I guess it's called the Austin Plan, which allows for multifamily housing and single residential family areas. And I'm absolutely, our whole neighborhood is up in arms about that. And we're absolutely against any multifamily housing being brought in, 6 or 8 units with increased density, decreased setbacks, etc. So I don't know how that figures into the housing element, but it was brought up, so I thought that I ought to mention it. So again, thank you for your work. Please keep in mind the mission statement. Those are the most important things. That's what the residents want, and our staff and they got to fight for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the speaker? So thank you again, Ms. Battersby. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Robert Lavoie. And if anyone else would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now, as there are currently no other hands raised.
Welcome, Mr. Lavoie. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Mayor Geringer and the council and the staff, thanks for all your work on this first draft of the HCD. I would agree with Elliot Hudson's letter about using the Bart lots in our first HCD submission. And I'd support the creation of the provisional overlay district to maximize the control of the 75 unit zoning to make it consistent as possible with our mission statement. I'd also like to agree on his specific comments for sections 222, the physical, economic, and regulatory characteristics, and 10.1.11 on the Bart lots in the draft housing element. I would like the staff to explain additionally, if they can, on the AFFH Area 2, page H29. Vice Mayor Anduri mentioned it, I believe. The talk about what possible areas of town that this is considering. Is it talking about downtown or out in the single family neighborhoods? And are they anticipating additional bonuses or densities or waivers in excess of what's allowed under SB 9? The Austin model had a $250 million bond funding for low-income housing, I believe, or maybe it was ADA adjustments. And for a similar population as Lafayette's, that would be about $6 million. I don't know if we have that much in our low-income fund from the developer fees, or if that would be something that we could get from Contra Costa County. It sounded like maybe there was going to be some collaborative efforts there. So if there's any clarification on that, I think it would help people. Finally, I would agree with Colin's email on 627 with his point, especially that the opportunity for a big project like the Bart and negotiating for the developers to address affordable housing and physical infrastructure improvements and environmental impacts. I just think that we want to leverage that to the maximum extent possible. So thank you for your listening, and
That was just the 30-second warning, but thank you.
once.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Okay, not hearing any or seeing any people going for the mic. Thank you, Mr. Lavoie.
Thank you.
And Suzanne, I'm not seeing any additional hands raised.
I do not see any hands raised at this time either.
Okay, so I actually have a question, a procedural question. I have a list of questions that were asked during this public comment time, and I'm sure that my colleagues have other questions, but do I close, and I'll look at you, Christopher, I think, do I close the public hearing portion, and then we will answer those questions raised during our question opportunity and discussion?
No, thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would recommend, I think at this point, if we have no more public comments, that we go ahead and close the public hearing, and then it could be brought back to staff to answer the questions that have been raised.
Great, thank you. That was my inclination. So I will now close the public hearing, and we will bring it back. Before we move into council questions, I would like to go through the questions, and then if council members or staff caught things that I missed, we can go back to that. One of the questions was to ask Diana to again explain the overlay district. And there were really a couple of questions in there or comments. And so explaining the overlay district and what it does, and whether or not that allows us to protect zoning, current zoning, from changes, future changes in the law. Is that overlay, does it have that provisional aspect to it?
That specific question, what Councilmember Clark asked me was, would we be both upzoning and doing the overlay? And I said, no, we're only doing an overlay. I would defer to staff to talk a little bit more about the specifics of the overlay, specifically Greg.
Great, thank you.
An overlay is simply an additional set of zoning, which is either more restrictive or more permissive than the underlying zoning, and is applicable to a qualifying project. So we take an example of the senior housing overlay district. It overlays a prescribed geographic area, and if the project meets the qualifying criteria, like it's housing for seniors, and we say what seniors are and what housing is, then they can invoke the provisions of that. And in this case, in this example, it will allow for additional density and reduced parking. So it is simply another layer of zoning, and as described. And so I think that we have put, and we'll ask the city attorney's office again to research and come back at a future point, not put Mr. Diaz on the spot, but it's my understanding that the council can enact an ordinance, a local law, which has a sunset period, or has a trigger mechanism in it, which would have it revert or be undone if some provision occurs. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I think that is very helpful. And the other thing that I think, just to clarify, that we are talking about the steps that will be taken, and they're in the housing element, in terms of moving forward with considering proactively complying with AB 2923 at a future meeting, that staff will be bringing that back to planning with design objective standards, and then it will come to the council. It's not a decision point for tonight. It is helpful in how we're moving forward with submitting our housing element to HCD. So the other question related in that had to do with infrastructure. And I think questions about what types of infrastructure. So our bus routes, Route 25 is a county connection route that was taken away. Question about discussions with our with Confire and other infrastructure related questions. So I don't know if that's Greg.
Happy to speak to that. Bart does not have a prescribed matrix of what type and what extent of infrastructure they are looking to see. However, I think any and all infrastructure improvements that support housing at the TOD site is a positive movement, and certainly those which are most directly related to parking, accessibility of system users to be able to get that last mile to and from the station, multimodal transportation and access. I think I mentioned parking. I'm going to mention it again because it is a station that has historically operated as a commuter station. But that is evolving over time. And so we recognize that parking is a high priority, as does Bart. And it is one of those things that Bart recognizes is costly to replace. And so anything that can be done to support that would move the needle more. And certainly, I think life safety issues, having a fire station proximate to the development would absolutely be an asset. Utilities and other infrastructure necessary to serve it as well, and I'll suggest connectivity to the rest of the downtown goods and services, and so restoring or creating a new bus routes or shuttle service that is serving the system and getting people around that would qualify.
Great, thank you. The next sort of series of questions that start off with asking Renata, and I'll say Greg, to elaborate on the explanation of why rezoning of the El Taro parking lots is not considered spot zoning.
Happy to tackle that. Attempting to share, here we go. So hopefully you're seeing a colorful zoning map.
Currently we're just, yeah, there you go.
Great. And so an example of spot zoning would be to place a green zoning or red zoning in the middle of another color. So there's no connectivity essentially between the subject property and the surrounding zoning. It is an island or a spot of zoning different from that which surrounds it. And it needn't just be limited to one parcel, it could be limited to a very few parcels. But so not spot zoning would be to increase a given area, a district, to expand that in one or more directions, which are contiguous to the existing zoning. So in that they are expanding an existing zoning. It's not taking a spot which is disparate from or not contiguous to and zoning that spot. It is simply expanding the existing zoning. And the council has done this previously for adjacent parcels that right at the cusp of multifamily and single family. Developer sought to upzone that next single family zoning, and city entered into a development agreement recognizing there'd be a benefit to the property owner and developer, and that provided for public benefits in exchange for that, essentially.
Okay, great, thank you. Low barrier navigation center in the requirements. Thank you, Diana.
That's me. Just as a backup, the city, actually every jurisdiction in the state is required to have zones that allow for emergency shelters even though there are not very many emergency shelters appearing anywhere these days. It's essentially a housing first model, which is get people into housing from homelessness. But there's a recognition that there is some transition that needs to be made. And a low barrier navigation center is essentially like a shelter, but with more privacy, with private rooms, or somehow people have their own private space. Some of the people will come in off the street who are perhaps have pets, which currently most emergency shelters do not allow. They come in with partners, also not allowed. People with a variety of disabilities that may not particularly fit the emergency shelters. And a low barrier navigation center is one that essentially allows people to come in off the street, regardless of where they are in the process, so that they can get processed, they get support, they have a place to live, they work through the issues that they may be going through, a lot of people with mental health issues, et cetera. And so it's low barrier in the sense of they don't have to give up their dogs or their possessions, or if they're drinkers, they may show up being drunk. Those things in a lot of situations are not allowed. And this is sort of an interim moment to help them get the support that they need so that they can succeed in permanent housing. Now, saying that, this is a requirement of every jurisdiction in the state of California. Saying that, there is no interest in putting low barrier navigation centers or emergency shelters in Lafayette. It's basically, those are, it's a requirement, but most of the places are near services. There are not services in Lafayette for these folks. And so it would be more places like Walnut Creek, Oakland, Richmond, et cetera. But it's a state requirement now that we allow them. And essentially, we would allow them in the same zoning districts that are where emergency shelters are allowed.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is, if HCD doesn't approve Bart as an opportunity site, how will the public be informed and be able to be engaged? Greg, Renata.
Yeah, happy to tackle that. In all of the ways that this public has been engaged previously, or so through all of our channels of public outreach and public notice. So I won't elaborate on those, but through the same mechanisms that we have used to date to engage the public.
Okay, thank you. And then I had this question to ask later just for clarification, but thank you to, I think, Ms. Battersby. When will the EIR be coming to the City Council for final approval or next round of review?
Righto. So we are receiving the final response to comments, which are essentially constitute a large part of the final EIR from ESA. The consultants will review those and then bring it forward to the Planning Commission first, and then on to the City Council. So it'll be brought to the Planning Commission in July, and then the City Council either late July or early August.
And it is normal, proper, all of those things for it to be going in parallel to, I mean, we would have loved to have it, but we just need to make sure that we have it before we submit our final housing element.
Before next January, yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And then there were a number, and then in our, I think Vice Mayor Anduri had started on it, and then a couple of public comments on the Austin model. And I'm not going to have the exact number. I think it was in, maybe Vice Mayor Anduri does, but where would this apply? Maybe tell us a little bit more about it so that we understand it and our constituents do. And then it talked about the funding models and how much money do we have in our low income fund or potential partnering or collaboration with the county.
with respect to the Austin model, which was included in the AFFH work, I would defer to Renata because she had been fielding questions about that. If you don't mind, Renata.
Sure. So one of the AFFH action items was to develop a program to incentivize deed restriction for affordable housing of kind of that lower density missing middle housing. And the incentives could be, the program list named the Austin Affordability Unlocked program as a reference. And so the AFFH action was to model a program off of that. And so Austin developed its own incentive standards and criteria, and we would, look to those as inspiration, but not necessarily as kind of a copy paste to use in our jurisdiction. And so I think that's where that the concern that there would be 6 to 8 units on a single family lot would be coming from, but that our intention is to investigate kind of those best practices and opportunities to encourage deed restriction of new units, and try and seek out these kind of cheaper, faster ways of developing affordable housing. So we don't have the specifics yet. That would be part of the program, is developing that program or developing that concept out more holistically.
Great, thank you. And then I think on funding questions, I don't know if we will look at funding sources. And so our existing affordable housing fund would be one of those tools. The county is looking at the housing trust fund, and I don't know how far along that is in development, but I don't know if that's what Mr. Lavoie was referring to, but that we would be looking at those. So I think those were the questions that I picked up from the public comment. And if I inaccurately accredited something to anyone, I will apologize in advance, but I will now open it to the council for questions and moving forward with discussion before we kind of go through the whole plan. So Vice Mayor Andoury.
I just have a few questions on Appendix G, the programs. And the first one picks up on what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
If you look at 1.2.B, special tax districts, it talks about how they can be an effective tool to generate local revenue, how we'll do a study, and the study will identify and analyze options appropriate for Lafayette, and if applicable, develop an implementation plan. And then it says that the completion timeframe is 2030. And I raised that in so 8 years from now. I guess one question here is, how do we see this relating to later in the agenda when we appoint a
fiscal sustainability ad hoc?
That's the one. Isn't that something that subcommittee perhaps should look at as one option? I just raised that. I have no problem with leaving this the way it is. I just want to make sure that there's the fact that it's here with 2030 doesn't mean that we're saying we're going to wait several years before we start on that. And I'm seeing Renata shake her head. So thank you very much.
Right. Yeah. So it's the completion deadline by which we will be reporting back to HCD that hopefully we've done it or made progress.
Okay. And then under goal 3, promote environmental responsibility, the first new program is 3.1.B, which is electrification for new residential construction, and it's got a good time frame there based on what we've just done. But I'm just wondering, was it considered to put in EV charging in here as well? Because if we're looking to show what we're doing to promote environmental responsibility, couldn't we put that in there? And maybe we don't have to do it now. If we want to send this off tomorrow, we can put it in a later draft, I assume. Would that be correct?
Yes, we could revisit it after comment letter comes in. However, there are already EV charging requirements as part of California Building Code that we use for new multifamily development.
Well, but
if we want to go beyond that.
But they're inadequate. That's why.
All right.
Okay. not to prejudge, but okay, I think I have one more question. Yeah, I just want to make sure, because you didn't mention the staff report, I mean, in the oral report, but it's in the written report, to change back 6.1.e to basically state, yes, we will waive lot merger processing fees. Right? That's your intent to change that back, correct? So now the last line of that will say, the city will waive lot merger processing fees for multifamily housing developments. Okay, just want to make sure.
Yes, we'll capture that.
Missed that.
Thank you. Good catch.
I think that, oh, okay, just for clarification, policy 6.12, I think it says new, and policy 6.12, diversity of housing types, use fourplexes, but this isn't fleshed out with any programs. Is that, am I missing something there? What's the explanation for that?
So during GPAC's initial discussion of the programs, we had made this one actually a program to look at our development standards and see if they were prohibiting those kind of missing middle housing options like fourplexes. And we found that, you know, aside from single family only, which, you know, SB 9 has kind of changed a little bit, and ADU rules have changed a little bit, but there weren't any existing barriers to the construction of this housing where multifamily is. So we felt it was more appropriate for it to become a policy as kind of an ongoing application that we would undertake. So if a fourplex were to come forward, our staff could look to point to that policy in the housing element and say, yes, this confirms with our intent.
Yeah, in a current multifamily zoned area.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions, or are we, okay, Councilmember Kendall?
So I'm back on that action item 2.1 with the Austin model. I thought we had discussion that night to say that this only applied to ADUs. That's what I have written in my notes. And I guess, so I was surprised to see this in there unaltered. And I'm just wondering if, I guess we sent that one through. I mean, I knew we talked about it for a while, and we're going to take it out or we're going to make it only apply to the ADUs, but I'm not seeing that reflected here. That's obviously not anybody else's recollection as well.
I don't have that in my notes.
Okay.
All
right.
Nor do I. Nope.
All right. Thanks. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Other questions? Since we're currently in Appendix G, are there other items that council members want to provide edits to or comments? Okay.
I do have a comment about that one item. It's like, I'm really uncomfortable with it. It seems so much broader and so many TBDs, and we'd have no funding and we have no nothing, that at least to me, I have a hard time committing to it. It doesn't mean we're not going to do it. It's a very big difference here, right? Is putting in our housing element, and when we know so little about it, and we haven't described it very well, and we're committing to it. And so if we don't do it, we'll get, penalized or whatever. We're going to have to take it out. And to me, it just seems, pretty bad policy to have something in here that's so broad that we don't really understand. And so for me, I really don't like this one in here for those reasons. Not that I don't want to do this, but given all those things and the world comes together and all this stuff, pulls together, of course we'll look at it. But to commit to it in our housing element, to me, is a very different decision. And so I really don't want to include it because there's too many unknowns in there. And I would rather just have us do it organically and then not have to officially track it in case all these other ifs and things don't come through. So that's how I stand on that one. That I'm just having a hard time. I understand every single other item in these programs and policies, but this one's just too loosey-goosey for me to commit to it. So I was just throwing that out to there.
So I, and this was one of the items, I do think that if we don't make a commitment to it and we say, oh, organically, we will come back and do it, happy to have the discussion amongst the colleagues and appreciate you bringing it forward, that it doesn't happen. And that and if you took out the model after Austin's Affordability Unlocked program, does that raise less red flags? I mean, I believe we will look at other models and we will look at a program that works best for our community, but that also moves us in the direction of truly trying to find ways to provide more affordable housing.
Right.
And so I appreciate that, we all want to do that, but I feel like that having it here makes a statement, and having a measurable makes a statement that we're going to do it. And that it's going to come back to us and everybody's going to get to weigh in and all of those things before it actually happens. To me, I think that it's important to have a statement or an implementation objective. Vice Mayor Anduri?
Let me follow up on the mayor's question. What impact is there if we delete the words model after Austin's Affordability Unlocked program? That can be one that we look at, but we could look at others as well. And that leaves the heart of it, which is looking at options. But I may be missing something, and
Same.
I think
is that okay?
Okay,
thank you.
Diana, do you have a read on that?
Well, this came from a consultant who has done a lot of AFFH work in the Bay Area, and they have been looking at a lot of different jurisdictions' work with AFFH stuff, and specifically came up with this because they were involved with it in some minor way, but felt like this is a way to really, this is a very good model to look at to incentivize housing. And so they have recommended it for many jurisdictions, not all, but many jurisdictions, especially smaller ones, because there aren't a lot of financial resources here, especially in smaller jurisdictions. Now, Austin is a bigger jurisdiction, but they came up with, like I think Renata has said in other communications, they've come up with a number of incentives that really are worth looking at beyond just throwing money at a project or an issue.
And so I hear the question. I think we could safely strike the word model from a direction. Thou shalt model it after this, and simply cite that Austin's Affordability Unlocked program is a good example.
Or say such as.
Or something, right?
Yep.
Yeah, this one just seemed like we were really committing to something that I'm uncomfortable with. Yeah,
I understand what you're saying there. I think I asked this at a previous meeting, but was there, I know this was considered by GPAC and by the Planning Commission, but was there ever a discussion of this specific item, any detail on this specific item?
No.
Okay. Yeah, well then, I've tried to find out a little bit about this, but I don't feel I know enough. I would feel even more comfortable, and if you think this guts it entirely, let me know, but to say something, I know we don't want to use explore, but maybe evaluate a by right approval for low density attached housing. With that, it's just saying we're going to pilot it
without any funding and
it
so many
becomes
things.
It becomes non-actionable when we say explore, look at. We have to have, if we're going to do that, we need concrete objectives, quantified objectives to say we're going to do a best practice review by thus and such a date. We're going to do this and that, etc. Just to say we're going to look at it, it will not pass muster without more detail.
But you're saying that we can add the detail that would help them know that we really are going to look at this, right? And but if it's a pilot or not a pilot,
to the extent we could be more definitive, it's in our benefit, especially with AFFH work.
Right.
So I think that the thresholds, I think the thresholds that staff is trying to touch on is between kind of reviewing, researching, evaluating, which is kind of one thing, and then the doing and implementing a program, even at a pilot level. So piloting a program doesn't necessarily mean it's permanent, doesn't necessarily mean that the provisions that have been developed to that date will be the final ones if the program even continues beyond the piloting. But piloting actually gets us to the action that HCD is seeking in this program.
You guys sounded really confident that there is a program that is out there that we're going to go to. And I wrote it down, but it's in my notes here somewhere, that with these other jurisdictions. What was the name of that again?
C4.
The entity?
Yeah. I mean, why can't we say work with C4 to do this or something? Is that?
Well, that's the how, I think.
Right.
But not the what that we're looking for, that HCD is looking for, is the how is important, but the what is foremost, I think.
But we don't even mention that in here, right?
Well, I think in my example, the piloting the program, details to be determined, is the what, the pilot program.
And you're asking Councilmember Candell, why not put the responsible party or something into the C4 or the collaboration?
To help make it more specific?
Well, no, based on where we are now, and we want to get this in tomorrow, I would feel comfortable putting it in if we cut the entire parenthesis, model after Austin's affordability model. And then that shows we're going to try to pilot this program. We're going to work with others to do it. And I think that's the statement we make. Whether we model it after Austin or somebody else, we will determine that later. I don't think we need to pin ourselves to Austin at this point.
I'd be more comfortable with that.
And we still have it captured as that's one example. Renata, does that work?
I'm saying take out the whole plan.
No, I hear that you're saying take it out, but does pilot a by right approval for low density attached housing that exceeds the BMR affordability requirements, period, capture, the essence of the action? And I think that it does, but, not losing for whoever's going to do this work, what a program could look like.
I think striking the parenthetical maintains the what of the pilot program. It doesn't include the kind of example or of Austin, but I think we have that captured internally as something.
Okay.
And also, there's more explanation of what we're going to do as you go across the chart here.
No, and then it comes to what the quantified objective is, which is to develop the pilot program. So, yeah. I think that if everyone agrees that taking the parenthetical out that we can have agreement on that, then and staff agrees that it achieves the desired action, I'm okay with that. And I see nodding. Okay, so anything else on Appendix G? So we have an implementation action plan, okay? Then we will go back up to the top to the, the housing element, the draft housing, so 9805. I mean, were there any additional comment? Well, actually, let's go here and then, or do my colleagues feel that we should discuss anything else that was in the discussion about complying with AB 2923 and the Bart TOD process in order to get us through the rest of the housing element review? Okay.
And so all that stuff will be, just make it clear, all the things that we talked about today with provisional, upzoning, all that will be considered not as part of the housing element, but a separate process. Great. Yeah, then I'm down. I'm okay with that.
Coming back. Nope. Go ahead.
Oh, no.
Well, except for that, there are some, go ahead, Vice Mayor. I mean, there are things in there that are part of the steps that we have in our narrative, but go ahead, Vice Mayor Anduri.
I'm just very hesitant. The only reason I'm jumping in is the word provisional. I don't know if that's a word that really relates to what we're, there's not a legal meaning to that, so I don't want to mislead anyone. The overlay, the transit-oriented development overlay district is what it is, and it'll operate as an overlay district.
Right.
If someone wants to call it temporary or provisional or banana, none of those have a legal meaning. So I just want to. Okay,
but it's still
having a trigger for it. All these things can be discussed later, right? That's what I meant about that, right?
Correct.
Sorry about this. Oh, sorry.
No.
Oh, Kitty.
It's sorry, that time. It's that.
She opens doors. I can't keep her out. So
it's okay. We are conducting business from our homes, so I'm surprised more things don't come in. So, okay. So we will move to, I believe, item 9A05, our draft housing element, the redlined version. And my question for my colleagues is, do you have any edits or suggestions based on discussion and input tonight on the housing element? Or are we okay with where we are right now? Vice Mayor Anduri?
Yeah, none beyond the ones we specifically discussed tonight and is called out in the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. Are you asking for questions or are you asking for comments?
Comments or changes. So if you have questions that will help us drive that, please.
I want to refer to Elliot Hudson's comments about section 2.2.2. And he suggested, and that starts in the physical, economic, and regulatory characteristics. And he suggested.
So in, can we hold
on page H10.
Okay, and that's 10 of
the housing element.
It is H9, 10, there we go. And with our PDF, it's 13 of 54.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And he made a bunch of, he wanted to address that very first sentence, but I want to start actually at more of in that first paragraph where it starts from, come here. Where it talks about how we're losing jobs. And it says in some cases, it's about halfway through the paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
And he suggested some much more specific wording. and I can read it, and I think you all read it, but to see if this is something that we do want to consider. So instead of what's in here now, his suggestion was that in some cases, this has come at the cost of losing commercial space, driving out long-established locally owned businesses, and thus costing jobs and livelihoods in the local economy. Moreover, new development of the downtown corridor threatens to displace much of Lafayette's current most affordable multifamily housing units. From a planning perspective, while the city's downtown is more suited than the residential neighborhoods to accommodate new housing units, given its proximity to regional transit station BART, the State Route 24 corridor, goods and services, and its location to the low-lying, reasonably flat areas of the city desires to balance the provision of both new and existing residential and commercial uses. He just added a bunch of descriptive wording in there, and it talks more about the real displacement of our locally owned businesses and how we really do want to care about that. And I just wondered if anybody else read his wording and thought that it was good or acceptable. Yeah. Carl, I don't know.
I did read it, and I'm trying to go back to where it is.
It was in his public comment.
Yeah, no, I read all of them, tried to print out many of them and match it back against it. Vice Mayor Anduri or Councilmember Clark, while I'm going to that, if you have any.
Yeah, I printed it out as well and read it. And in the overall, looking at what we're trying to accomplish with the language we've got in there, I think we're better off sticking with the language that we've got. I did consider each of the changes, but I don't, in what we're trying to accomplish, I don't think we gain by any of that language.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I also looked at it, and I really appreciate the public looking at this level of detail. And, there are many good ideas and many things that resonated with me. I just sort of feel like we're at the finish line here, and I was really trying to weigh the materiality of like, is this really going to make the difference that we've got to put this in here at this late juncture? And so I think I'm still comfortable to go with the language that we have it, and just continue to move forward.
And so do any of you want to try to somehow include our mission statement in here, some of the wording from our mission statement, in this draft housing element, rather than just keeping it in our general plan?
I think that where it will be in our general plan and where it drives everything, I think that we have picked up, in a number of places, not the very specific, but we have picked up the smaller town while still trying to, move forward with the overall narrative. So I think that we have tweaked some of those. I don't think the full edition of the mission statement is necessary in the housing element, because then would we put it in every piece of the elements? I get that this is the one that goes to the state separately, but I think it's all part of capturing it in the general plan. And,
right, but the desire of so many of our residents and in our mission statement to at least try to retain some of our semi-rural character, it isn't anywhere in here, and it does seem like a bit of a miss. Calling it, we have our hillside residential neighborhoods paired with a lively, walkable downtown, doesn't capture, wanting to do, preserve some of that semi-rural character while we have a lively downtown, right? So yes, Diana. Oh, sorry.
Mayor, if it pleases
go
you,
ahead, please.
Just an FYI that we have included in all of our public comments, everyone who has spoken out specifically about the concern about the semi-rural character of Lafayette. So it's included and will be sent off to HCD. They will understand all of the comments about the concerns regarding the desire for to retain the semi-rural character of the community.
So other council members, I did speak in that. And then I have a question, so of staff, that right now we're at this place, we're submitting this as a draft. As we move forward, HCD will come back with comments. They may approve everything, but they will still have comments, and we will still have the opportunity to dig into editing certain pieces of this and adding descriptors and those kinds of things, correct?
Yes.
And I guess where I am on where the narrative is right now, I think that, and I could be completely wrong, they're going to read every single word, but that the real crux of this is the getting our opportunity sites through and complying with the AFF, and I'm going to further affirmatively furthering fair housing and the criteria that they have there. And so while I very much appreciate all of the edits that have been suggested, I don't think that making a decision today not to include them for this initial submission precludes us from adding them later. I do also want to point out, and I could be wrong, but I did try to go back through and look, and we put all of the comments into the one of the appendices, all of the public comments, all of the stories in response to constituent concern about cherry picking different ones. And I may have missed the little boxes with the different stories in them, but I think they're all in the back, and Diana or Renata or Greg can correct me. They're all in one place, equally presented. And I reread them again. And so I think it does capture the where the residents have stated what our preferences are and why we live here. And I appreciate that staff listened to our residents for that. And I'm okay with submitting this particular draft right now, even though I did go and compare, all of the different suggestions that were there. But happy to hear, obviously Vice Mayor and Dorian, Councilmember Kwok. In response to your statement, Councilmember Kendall, I didn't want that to come out, that it wasn't hadn't started this conversation. Anything else? So anything else on the housing element? Are there other pieces, where we had input that we think we should change? Vice Mayor Anduri?
So I'll just go back to the understanding that in the cover letter, the points about RENA number, Bart, the interrelation, all that will be described. Okay.
And in follow-up conversations with the reviewers and the head of the reviewers in making that case. Okay, so based on that, do you want a motion? We need a motion here, or just direction? Well, ultimately, I believe we will need a motion. I guess the question is, do you want a motion on each piece? We have the Greg feedback and direct staff, planning staff to submit. And so I think after the feedback and any edits that we might have, I believe we need a motion to move the whole housing element draft forward with all of the appendices. And I see staff nodding their head. Correct. Their collective heads. So we'll just go through the other with the Renata.
Yeah, I was just going to try and go through the edits that just so we captured them. But if you're going to go through the rest of the appendices, I'll hold off.
Right. Okay. And so, so moving on to Appendix A, 9A06. Are there any questions or comments there? I see early shaking of heads and still thank you. Appendix B, 9A07. Okay, thank you.
Spoiler alert, I'm not going to have any.
Okay, so.
Me neither, me neither.
Okay, well, there you go. Yeah. So now, Renata, do you want to go through what edits you think that staff has, and then we will do a motion to accept the draft housing element?
Yes, please. So we have feedback to, within the submission cover letter, include language regarding the RENA allocation figure and the Bart site and the interrelation between those two. Within the housing element main body, small change to convert reference to tables to figures. Same with another item on H8. Make an adjustment to the language around homeowners and downsizing and the concern there. And a typo on page H47. And then adjustments to the AFFH action item 2.1 to remove reference to Austin's Affordability Unlocked program, and change and in all the pieces where that's referenced throughout the document, and then changing item 6.1.e to confirm waiving of lot merger fees. That is everything I have written down. Did I miss any items?
I see lots of nodding of heads, and I do want to thank, we thank everybody because it's taken a lot of work to get us here. But I also want to thank my colleagues for the really thorough preparation and the really thorough look at all of this, and taking all of the written comment and all of the public comment and, very much working to get to this place, which is, as a reminder, our first draft to HCD. And so with that, do I have a motion to approve and direct staff to submit the draft housing element to the State Department of Housing and Community Development for review with all appendices A through G?
As amended, so moved.
Thank you. And a second?
A second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Vice Mayor Anduri, a second by Councilmember Kendall. I will conduct the roll call vote. Councilmember Kendall.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anduri.
Aye.
And I am an aye. And so we are submitting our draft housing element. And yeah,
popping champagne.
Yeah,
what an effort.
Yay!
Yay.
Nicely done, everybody.
Yes, popping champagne and fingers crossed. But again, there isn't enough kind of thank you and gratitude and words to express, because this has been a couple of years and a lot of input and a lot of time on the part of everyone, residents and everyone in the community. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And with that, we are now at our 2 hours from our previous break. And I think this is an appropriate time to take a 5-minute, we're about 2 hours, to take a 5-minute break. So if you'll set your clock, it looks like we'll be back a little after 9, like 9:03 or so. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
You are currently tuned in to the Lafayette City Council meeting. The City Council is in recess and will return shortly.
Welcome back. I think we all synchronized our watches pretty closely, so. Okay, well, welcome back. And again, just a nice kind of big sigh of relief. And we will move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 9B, also a public hearing. And I will I see Tracy Robinson has her hand raised to come in and to lead us in discussing and adopting our budget and work plan. Welcome, Tracy.
Hello, Mayor Geringer, members of the council. So the item before you is basically, it's the same budget that you saw at your last council meeting with Exhibit A, which outlines the changes that you approved at the last meeting. I did just want to make one point. The orange budgets that you should have in your hands that were delivered do not exactly, thank you, Vanna. That budget does not include these changes because I had that budget printed actually before we had the meeting. So I just wanted to be clear. So what you have before you are the changes that you approved. Those can be seen in Exhibit A. Basically, that just shows you specifically which accounts are getting increases in budgets and where that money is coming from. So if you have any questions on that, I'm happy to answer that. So what you have before you is that budget, which you will then need to approve by adopting Resolution 2022-40. You will need to adopt the CEQA findings of categorical exemption for the projects in the 2023 CIP. I agendized it so that you would have the option to discuss and advise the ARPA subcommittee on potential uses for the second tranche. Council members Ann Dury and Dawson did have an ARPA subcommittee meeting, I think the week before last. So Council member or Vice Member Ann Dury, Mayor Ann Dury may have some thoughts on that. And then the last thing you will need to do tonight is to appoint 2 council members to the Fiscal Sustainability Subcommittee. So with that, do you have any questions?
Okay, so are there any council member have any questions before we go to public comment? I'm seeing shaking of heads. I want to thank you very much for the great staff report and the work that has been done along the way by you, Tracy, and all of and City Manager Servatza and all of the department heads and staff on bringing us a very thorough look at the budget. And then thanks to my colleagues for the work that we did at the last meeting. So with that, we will open for public comment. And so Suzanne, will you please instruct members of the public on how to do that?
Certainly. If any members of the public would like to speak on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now. I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Okay, well, we will bring it back to the council. And are there any comments or things that council wants to say before we start going through the action items? And then we will have a couple that will probably spur a little more discussion. So on our first recommendation, we just conducted the public hearing and we're being asked to adopt resolution 2022-40 and adopting the proposed budget and work plan as amended by Exhibit A, appropriating the revenue and expenses, confirming the city's investment policy, determining the appropriations limit for fiscal year 2022-23, determining fees for all city services, and authorizing transfers and expenditures, including the 2023 capital improvement program. And do I have a motion? Vice Mayor Anduri?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Councilmember Kwok. Thank you. We have a motion by Vice Mayor Anduri and a second by Councilmember Kwok. And I will conduct the roll call vote. So Councilmember Kandel.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anduri.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. And so we have adopted a proposed budget and work plan and all the accompanying materials that go with that. So thanks again, Tracy. So we'll move on to the second recommendation, which is to adopt CEQA findings of a categorical exemption for projects in the 2023 Capital Improvement Program, CIP, and authorize staff to record a notice of exemption. Are there any questions or discussion before I ask for a motion? Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved. Oh,
Thank
go ahead,
you.
Councilmember Kwok.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Kandel and a second by Councilmember Kwok, and I will conduct a roll call vote. Councilmember Kandel.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anduri.
Aye.
And I'm an aye, and so we have approved that motion as well. So now we will come to the item, which is to discuss and advise the ARPA subcommittee on potential uses for the second tranche of the ARPA funds. And so Vice Mayor Anduri, I'll turn it over to you for any comment and since Councilmember Dawson isn't here, I know Tracy said she agendized it here so that we could discuss and direct, but go ahead.
Okay, well, Councilmember Dawson chairs this subcommittee, so I'm sorry she's not with us tonight, but I understand she may be watching, so I'll try to do this justice. But we did, as Tracy mentioned, we did meet last Monday and we anticipated this part of the agenda and what we would propose. As you know, actually, well, in July, we'll get the second $3.18 million tranche. And what we did in the meeting was look at the different areas in which the council allocated funds from the first tranche. And we discussed which ones we might want to allocate further funds. And there are certain areas that we think we need to continue to watch, but it certainly is not going to take all of the 3.18 million, particularly when you consider that one of the big intents of ARPA was to backfill revenue shortages incurred by the city. So we think at this point, we can say that 2.18 million could be used for that purpose, but we'd like to leave open, continuing to consider the million as to whether we need to use that for the other purposes of the ARPA funds, including for public health purposes, for example, more money for ventilation and filtration in city spaces and other things as well. We anticipate that the bulk of that money may then move into the backfill category, but we just, for the next year or so, we don't know where things are going. You know, just as an example, we didn't think when we started this process, and it was about 15 months ago, that we'd be where we are now in the pandemic, where we still keep hearing about our friends and neighbors who are getting COVID. And I think that means that we need to focus more on what we do in our public buildings to make sure filtration and ventilation are at a level where it's just safer for people to gather. So we just think that we need to look at this some more and hold some money in reserve to consider using for those purposes. And we're certainly open to guidance from the council as to how we should proceed.
Thank you. I think that Chair Dawson would approve of your presentation. Councilmember Kendall or Kwok, do you have any questions or comments? Councilmember Kendall?
Yeah, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding that we are thinking that we'll take the 2.1 million of the 3.1 for backfilling city revenues, but we'll keep 1 million here just to not commit. That's what I'm hearing.
That's right.
Correct. Okay. Yes. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely support dividing some portion to backfill for the lost revenue and for, all the fixing of the patios and roads and all those things that we do need revenue for. So that makes sense. Now, as to, I think it makes sense, the 2/3, 1/3 that you've divided it. I would ask staff to also, opine on that ratio. But I do also know that there were many, many requests in the first tranche for support. And I know that we were not able to fund all of them. So having a little bit here in the second tranche to fund those ARPA requests or other future ones seems prudent to keep some amount there for, as you pointed out, what that was also, ARPA money was also earmarked for recovery. So again, I definitely think it's a good idea to put some into each bucket, and 2/3, 1/3 sounds like a very reasonable division of funds. I'd be curious, not to put staff right on the spot if they haven't heard of this ratio yet, but if they have any comments on that.
Before staff comments, we wouldn't have proposed it if Tracy hadn't.
No, it's fine. I was in the meeting, and I think that keeping it out, we have until 2024 to commit, and that's, 18 months from now. So I'm fine. I think we're fine with that. I think we'll have a better handle on what we need, and I think we're going to see exactly how hard inflation may hit some of our accounts. So I think just keeping something in reserve is a good idea.
And Tracy, can you confirm that by commit by 2024, when do we have to spend the money, or is commit and spend the same thing?
We have to commit by 2024, but spend by 2026.
Thank you. Okay, so any other questions or comments on that item? And it just occurred to me that they were all part of the recommendation. So I did go to public comment. And so I wasn't going to go to public comment for every one of these items because we're basically deliberating and taking action. And Christopher, is that a good assumption?
Yeah, no, thank you, Mayor. I think that's totally appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so do we need a motion on that, Tracy, to accept the, or that was...
that's really not a recommendation. I think that's just direction, and that's fine.
Thank you. Okay, so then now we will go down to appoint council members to a fiscal sustainability subcommittee. And I grappled with this, and I want to make an initial proposal, and then and have a discussion about it if there are reasons not to move in this direction. But the fiscal sustainability subcommittee will be working on our priority number 4, which is developing a plan for fiscal sustainability and looking at revenue measures, which as our budget projection prepared by Tracy shows that this is and as we noted, have been noting for several months now, that this is a priority. And what I would like to do is I would like to propose that we appoint Vice Mayor Andori, because he will be going into as presumably the leadership role in the coming months. And so we'll have that transition across the two parts of our fiscal year, budget year. And then also Councilmember Kwok, because he has been championing this since coming on to the council. And I know that I personally would love to serve on this committee and would love to be, part of the work looking at whether and how wide a task force we form and, all of those things. But I do think that, and I'm sure Councilmember Candell and Councilmember Dawson would also like to do that. I do think that for the reasons I stated, that Vice Mayor Anduri and Councilmember Kwok will be good subcommittee. And also, we're all going to be involved in every step of the way. They'll gather the information much as the ARPA committee has, and we will be able to, have our voices heard just as the public will. So unless there's, discussion or either one of those two want to push back and not accept it, I would like to ask for a motion to appoint Vice Mayor Anduri and Councilmember Kwok to the Fiscal Sustainability Subcommittee. Councilmember Candell.
I absolutely support this this makeup of this subcommittee. So I'll make the motion to nominate Councilmember Anduri and Councilmember Kwok to the, what do they call it? Fiscal Sustainability Subcommittee.
Great, thank you. And do I have a second from one of the two of you?
Thank you very much for the honor, and I'm happy to take it on with Vice Mayor Anduri. I'll second that.
Okay, good. So we have a motion by Councilmember Candell and a second by Councilmember Kwok, and I will conduct a roll call vote. Councilmember Candell.
Aye.
Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anduri.
Aye.
And I am a resounding aye. And so we have a Fiscal Sustainability Subcommittee, and I look forward to having this on our agendas as we move forward into this next part of the year. So thank you both for your willingness to serve, and Councilmember Candell for your resounding support. So with that, I think that we have finished agenda item 9B. So Tracy and all, thank you very much. So we will now move to items removed from the consent calendar. And we did have one item, I believe 6B. And Vice Mayor Anduri, you asked that be pulled. And I agree. So take it away.
Yep. Well, once again, we have a super volunteer. Mark Poole has been on Park Trail and Recreation for 15 years. Anyone who's served at any length of time on a city commission or on the council knows that 15 years is a huge contribution to the city. And it was done with such commitment, such leadership, and such patience. To watch Mark lead a meeting when he was chair of the commission, he was chair of the subcommittees. He's just a great leader. And over 15 years, there are so many accomplishments that are part of his legacy, having been on PTR, that I just wanted to call attention to it and have the council explicitly thank him for that contribution.
Yay. And I will reiterate that right up until the very last moment, his poise and commitment to the community and the lovely resignation letter that he sent to us today. The key part that jumped out for me, and I agree with everything that Vice Mayor Anduri said. The thing that jumped out was that he said, and I quote, "I cannot promise that you will not see me again in some capacity." So I thought that was great that he leaves open the door to come back and work in some other capacity, but will in the meantime be on the sidelines watching and cheering everyone on. So thank you very much, Mark Poole, for your service. And we will accept a motion to regretfully accept the resignation, but with the respect and gratitude. So do I have a motion,
So
or does
moved.
anyone else want to make a comment? Okay, and actually I should probably ask if there, and then I'll take the second. And then are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this item?
If any members of the public would like to comment on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now. Mayor, there is at least one public comment.
Okay.
Sharon Farley.
Thank you. And we will welcome her over.
I just wanted to say many, many thanks to Mark. That's incredible. 15 years. I am in awe. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for raising your hand and coming and providing comment. I know Mark will appreciate it. Are there any other members, Suzanne?
Mayor, I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay, and so just before I remembered to go to public comment, we had a motion by Vice Mayor Anduri and a second by Councilmember Kwok. And so I will conduct the roll call vote. Councilmember Kendall.
Aye.
And Councilmember Kwok.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anduri.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. And so we have approved item 6B on our consent calendar. So now we'll move to agenda items under 11, Council and Commission reports. And this is the opportunity for council members to report on activities and consideration for matters we might want to bring forward in the future. So are there any council member reports? Councilmember Kendall.
Yes, 2 Fridays ago, we had a ABAG General Assembly meeting. And the reason why the items on the agenda that we actually voted on were mundane. It was the budget and some work plans. But what they did bring up was an item that we probably should consider and look at and consider writing a letter to them. They are considering putting an item on the ballot in 2024 to raise funding for housing. And I voiced my my general support for such a concept. It would be a regional concept. I also realized, and I also mentioned them, the devil's in the details on how to make this work really well. And so I would love to get all of your feedback on this, and any things as us as a council will come together and say, hey, you know what, right now all the money, for one thing we may want to consider is that all the money is going directly to the counties and not back to the cities. And we may want to say, hey, we'll support this if brings it back to the city. So I would love to bring this to us, their proposal, and see if we can write a letter and give our comments as a city.
I see nodding of heads. I think that's a great idea. And I see Naroop our city manager taking notes, and I'll rely on staff to, bring back so that we have in our staff report all of the sort of information about where the measure is right now. I know many of us have probably been, some of us have been following along as it's, being developed. And so I look forward to the discussion. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Great, thank you. And then one more thing at the DEIB, CEDIB meeting, this Friday at 4:30 is a Take Back the Overpass event. And so if you want to go up to the El Catrolo overpass and be part of express what you'd like to express, you're happy, you're sad, but mostly DEI issues that we feel our country may be taking a right or wrong direction on. We invite everybody up there this Friday at 4:30. And they're also going to have a community event July 28th. That should be great. Councilmember Anduri.
On the event, it's this Friday? Which Friday?
This Friday at 4:30. That's what I wanted to tell you.
Okay, and is it anticipated that anyone's going to have signs or any printed material on the overpass?
I think Councilmember
Oh.
Campbell dropped off.
Not sure what happened to her. Oh, there she is.
I'm sure she'll be back.
Sorry about that. Yeah. Is there any, go ahead.
I was just asking if it's anticipated that people who are on the overpass are going to be carrying signs.
Yes, please. Yes.
Carrying, but
It's
not
the second
attaching?
one, carrying but not attaching. And it's, this is the second event that they've had, the CEDIB has had on the overpass.
Well, I'll just say, my position was no matter how great the cause was, there shouldn't be anything on the overpass that could potentially distract drivers. So I would hope that would be rethought.
Okay, thank you. I will bring back your comments.
And for the community, thank you to Councilmember Candell and Kwok for attending the meeting. To confirm and clarify, this is the citizen group, and you are liaisons to that group. And I appreciate Vice Mayor Anduri, your concerns, and I just wanted to make sure that it's part of that collaborative work, and I appreciate that we want to watch the fine line of supporting activities on the bridge.
Yeah, I know. I just want to make it absolutely clear. I don't care who's supporting it. I don't care what it is. I don't care what the message is. I don't think there should be printed material that's visible from the freeway on the overpass. I think that goes against the spirit of what we were discussing last year. And my position is no matter what the message is, the regulations, the California regulations, the spirit of the regulations is that there's nothing that should interfere with drivers below.
Got it. So any other comments, Councilmember Candell, on other items? Councilmember Kwok or Vice Mayor Anduri?
Sure, I have two, but I'll defer to you to talk about the event at the Park Hotel on Friday.
Go ahead.
All right. Last Friday, the Lafayette Chamber of Commerce honored Business Person of the Year, John McCormick of Marinda Music. It was a fantastic event that was all outdoors in the courtyard on a very warm day, which was perfect at 7 p.m. in the evening. It was the most ideal place in the world to have a party.
Yeah.
And there were so many heartwarming accolades, and Mayor Geringer, fantastic job to honor John, and a real so talented, and didn't know so many things about him. I wish all of you could have been there because it was a terrific community event. And I'll the mayor can add more onto that. But the next day, on Saturday, I attended the La Marinda Area Radio Interest Group, a ham radio group that once a year they do a field day where they set up and they run all of their radio equipment on generators, just in case they're practicing in the event of an emergency. So related to my role on the Emergency Preparedness Commission, I was quite interested to see what this group does to set up their antennas, broadcast to other regions around the United States and the world. And it's a very enthusiastic volunteer group we have that's related to La Marinda CERT and the Emergency Preparedness Commission. So they were up at 7 in the morning till 7 at night for 12 hours doing this. It was really quite amazing.
Great.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Anduri. So on those two things, on the Business Person of the Year, I agree with Councilmember Kwok. It was just a very feel-good event. Kathy Merchant did a presentation as part of the toasting him, and the Park Theater Trust were her backup kind of singers, if you will, but very funny. And she's Stanford and he's Cal, and so she did all that. But one of the pieces, John, just epitomizes how how important our small businesses are in the community and how important volunteerism is in the community, because beyond his small business with his wife, Colleen, he, through the pandemic, just very much jumped in and kept things going with Zoom and his technical background. But he also, during that time, achieved a degree from Harvard in history and went back and exercised. And part of his thesis was a book that will be coming out next year on highlighting the contributions and struggles and challenges of the and Asian and Chinese immigrants in the Napa Valley where he grew up, and just the things he didn't learn in college, and how much he learned, and how much he wanted to, bring a voice to this. And it was just really lovely, and that he loves ribbon cuttings. But I was very impressed by his Harvard graduate, and being a Harvard graduate and writing this book from his heart. And then I missed the La Miranda Radio Group. I have been before, and so I share your enthusiasm. It's always amazing to go and watch the commitment to the folks on a CCTA school district. We did have a meeting with Mike Moran and Peter Engel from CCTA, and Patrick, our newest, Patrick Gollier, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, our newest transportation person, about where CCTA can help with preparing school maps. And it'll be a longer term, for drop off and pickup. It'll be a longer term, but it was a great conversation. And the superintendent Whitmore, we're hoping to get some information back about potentially what those costs might be, because the school district has some funds. And anyway, so just continuing that partnership to make sure that we're continuing that safe routes work. And I'm sure I'll think of something in the middle of the night, but that's all I had in my notes. So we will move on to our city manager update.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a pitch. I know you mentioned this earlier. We're recruiting city planners and an engineer. And if anyone out there in the audience knows of entry-level and senior planners, please ask them to apply to the city of Lafayette. The second item I wanted to present to the public and to you was foot traffic or walk-ins to the city have been very light over the last 2+ years. The city offices at DESCO are open from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And as a pilot just for the summer at this point, we are closing the city offices to just walk-in traffic on Fridays. If you want to meet a planner or any staff member, you can always make an appointment and meet them in person. We're all available via email and telephone, but we're looking at using the Fridays to give the front office staff in particular time to catch up on their other duties, which sometimes gets interrupted during the weekday. So I just wanted to point that out. It's also in the weekly roundup last week. If you have any questions, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to explain. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for the city manager? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to 11C, which will be Vice Mayor Anduri and I, with a resolution 2022-42 appointing 2 members to the Planning Commission. It maybe should read reappointing 2 members, but we did conduct interviews with Greg Mason, Commissioner Mason, and Christina Sturm, Commissioner Sturm, who have been serving. And as it works out in their cycle, their current positions needed to come before the the City Council's planning subcommittee. So we conducted 1 interview on Friday with Mr. Mason and one very early this morning with Commissioner Sturm. And Vice Mayor Andori and I would very much like to move that we would like to reappoint them. And so I will now turn it over to Vice Mayor Andori to move the item. And
so moved.
Thank you. And do I have a second?
The Mayor, before we take the second, just
sure
there's no public comment.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Not a
you.
problem.
I'm getting to that point in the meeting that, you really have to do the nudge. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on this item?
If there are any members of the public who'd like to comment on this item, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom now. Mayor, I do not see any hands raised.
Great, thank you. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Quoth. So I will conduct a roll call vote. Councilmember Kendall.
Aye.
And Councilmember Quoth.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Andori.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. And so we have reappointed Commissioners Mason and Sturm. And again, so much gratitude, but so much volunteerism in our community. So thank them for being willing to continue to serve. So on our Planning Commission. So we have no written communications in our packet, separate from what we received on other items. And so unless there's anything else for the good of the order, I will adjourn the meeting. I would like to adjourn the meeting in memory of Dr. Armando G. Samaniego, who passed away on May 21st, 2022. Dr. Samaniego, for those who might not know, but I know that many of us do know and personally know, Dr. Sam launched the first StatMed urgent care clinics here in Lafayette. As according to his family, he was a gentleman devoted to his family, his community, and lived by the philosophy that everyone deserves the highest quality of medical care, no matter their wealth or their standing. Those who met him were struck by his abiding warmth and his generous heart and spirit. And so on behalf and in recognition and with sympathy to his family, his wife Lizette, his sons Daniel, Gabriel, and Michael, and his siblings, we will adjourn this evening in memory of Dr. Samaniego. So thank you, and thank you all for a very productive, very fulfilling meeting. So thank you.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
evening. Good night.
Good night, everybody.